This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I was so excited for my adventure in the Amazon rainforest. After months of planning and saving up, I had finally made it to this incredible place teeming with exotic wildlife and lush vegetation. Little did I know that the real danger would come not from the jungle itself, but from someone I foolishly trusted. On my first day in the small town at the edge of the rainforest, I met Rahul. He seemed friendly and knowledgeable, offering his services as a local guide for a reasonable price. His easygoing demeanor and claims of extensive experience put me at ease. Looking back, I should have been more cautious, but I was caught up in the excitement of finally being there. We set off early the next morning, hiking into the dense jungle. At first, everything was amazing. Rahul pointed out colorful birds and explained the medicinal uses of various plants. The sounds of the forest surrounded us. Bird calls, rustling leaves, and the occasional distant roar of what I hoped was a jaguar. As we ventured deeper into the wilderness, I noticed Rahul becoming quieter and more agitated. He started glancing around suspiciously and quickening our pace. When I asked if everything was okay, he brushed off my concerns. A knot of unease began forming in my stomach. After about 4 hours of hiking, we reached a small clearing. Rahul abruptly stopped and turned to face me. The friendly smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating look that sent chills down my spine. "Give me your backpack and everything valuable you have," he demanded in a low voice. I froze, unable to process what was happening. "What? Why? I don't understand." Rahul's expression hardened. "Don't play dumb. I know you rich tourists always carry cash and expensive gadgets. Hand it all over now if you want to make it out of this jungle alive." My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I glanced around frantically, but we were utterly alone in the middle of nowhere. There was no one to call for help. "Please, you don't have to do this," I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't have much cash, but you can have it. Just don't hurt me." He laughed cruelly. "Oh, I'll be taking everything. And you better hope it's enough, or things will get very unpleasant for you." As he took a menacing step towards me, survival instinct kicked in. In one desperate move, I hurled my heavy backpack at his face and took off running into the undergrowth. I heard him curse and start crashing after me, but adrenaline propelled me forward faster than I'd ever run before. Branches whipped at my face and I stumbled over roots, but I didn't dare slow down. I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I had to put as much distance between myself and Rahul as possible. The thick vegetation provided some cover, but also slowed me down. I could hear him shouting threats behind me, sometimes sounding closer, sometimes farther away. After what felt like hours of frantic flight, my legs were burning and my lungs felt like they were on fire. I knew I couldn't keep up this pace much longer. Spotting a massive fallen tree ahead, I made a split-second decision to hide. I dove into the hollow space beneath the trunk, squeezing myself as far back as possible. Curled up in the damp, musty darkness, I tried to quiet my ragged breathing. Every snapping twig or rustle of leaves made me flinch, certain Rahul was about to discover my hiding spot. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I lay there, paralyzed with fear. The jungle sounds that had seemed so enchanting earlier now took on a menacing quality. Was that just a bird call, or Rahul signaling to unseen accomplices? Eventually, the immediate terror began to subside, replaced by the grim realization of my situation. I was alone in the Amazon rainforest with no supplies, no guide, and no idea how to get back to civilization. and somewhere out there, a dangerous man was hunting for me. As the light began to fade, despair set in. I was utterly lost, and staying put seemed just as risky as trying to find my way out. Dehydration and exposure were very real threats, not to mention the jungle predators that would be more active at night. Just as hopelessness threatened to overwhelm me, I heard something that made my heart leap: human voices. At first, I was afraid to reveal myself, paranoid that it could be Rahul with reinforcements. But as the voices drew closer, I realized they were speaking a language I didn't understand, probably the indigenous dialect of the area. Screwing up every last ounce of courage, I crawled out from my hiding place and stumbled towards the sound. I must have looked like a wild creature myself, scratched, filthy, and wide-eyed with fear. But the small group of local men I encountered showed no fear, only concern. Through a combination of broken English and pantomime, I managed to convey that I was lost and in danger. They immediately sprang into action, leading me swiftly through the darkening forest. I was still terrified that Rahul might appear at any moment, but having these kind strangers with me gave me hope. After about an hour of hiking, we emerged from the jungle near a small cluster of buildings, a village I hadn't even known existed. The relief of seeing signs of civilization again was overwhelming. My rescuers brought me to what seemed to be the village elder, an older woman with a weathered face and kind eyes. She listened intently as one of the men explained the situation. Though we couldn't communicate directly, her compassionate expression needed no translation. She gestured for me to sit and brought me water and some kind of hearty stew. As I gratefully ate my first food since that morning, she spoke quietly with the others. I gathered that they were debating how to get me safely back to the town where I'd started. There was clearly concern about the dangerous man still out in the jungle. In the end, they decided it was safest for me to spend the night in the village. They set me up in a small but clean hut, assuring me through gestures that someone would keep watch. Exhausted beyond belief, I fell into a fitful sleep filled with nightmares of being chased through an endless green maze. The next morning, 2 of the younger men from the village escorted me on the long trek back to town. They were clearly experienced jungle navigators, following trails I never would have noticed. We encountered no sign of Rahul, but I remained on edge the entire time. When we finally reached the town, I went straight to the local police station to report what had happened. They took my statement seriously, but I got the impression this wasn't the first time they'd heard of guides taking advantage of tourists. They promised to investigate, but warned me it would be difficult to track someone down in the vast rainforest. I spent another day recovering in town before catching the first available flight home. As the plane took off, I felt a complex mix of emotions: lingering fear, profound gratitude to my rescuers, and a newfound respect for the power and danger of the jungle. This experience changed me in ways I'm still processing. I've always considered myself a savvy traveler, but this showed me how vulnerable we can be in unfamiliar territory. I was lucky to escape with my life, and I know the outcome could have been much worse. I still love to travel and explore new places, but I approach it differently now. I'm much more cautious about who I trust and always make sure someone knows my exact plans. I also have a deeper appreciation for the kindness of strangers. Without the help of those villagers, I might not have survived. The Amazon itself remains a place of both beauty and danger in my mind. I'm glad I got to experience its wonders, but the memory of those terrifying hours lost in its depths will stay with me forever. It's a reminder that even in our modern, connected world, there are still wild places where the old rules of survival apply. For anyone planning their own jungle adventure, my advice is simple. Do your research, use reputable guides, and always trust your instincts. The rainforest is an incredible place, but it demands respect. And remember, the most dangerous predators aren't always the ones with claws and fangs. Sometimes they come disguised as a friendly face. I was so excited for our romantic getaway. My girlfriend Lily and I had been planning this trip for months. A cozy cabin in the woods, just the two of us, away from the noise and stress of the city. We arrived on a crisp fall afternoon, driving down a winding dirt road through dense forest until we reached the quaint log cabin nestled among towering pines. At first glance, it was absolutely perfect, rustic yet comfortable, with a big stone fireplace and huge windows looking out into the wilderness. We unpacked the car, stocked the fridge with food and wine, and settled in for what we thought would be a blissful week of relaxation. That first evening was magical. We cooked dinner together, opened a bottle of red, and cuddled by the fire as we watched the sun set through the trees. As night fell, the forest came alive with the hoots of owls and chirping of crickets. It was so peaceful compared to the constant noise of the city. We went to bed early, tired from the drive. I drifted off quickly, Lily curled up beside me. But sometime in the middle of the night, I jolted awake. At first, I wasn't sure what had woken me. Then I heard it, a loud crack from outside, like a branch snapping. Probably just an animal, I told myself. But I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. I carefully got out of bed, not wanting to wake Lily. Peering out the bedroom window, I scanned the shadowy tree line. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the clearing around the cabin. That's when I saw it, a flash of movement at the forest's edge. Just for an instant, but unmistakable. A dark figure darting between the trees. My heart started racing. I blinked hard, thinking I must be seeing things. When I looked again, there was nothing there. Just stillness and silence. I stood frozen at the window for several long minutes, straining my eyes and ears, but whatever it was seemed to be gone. Eventually I climbed back into bed, but sleep eluded me. I lay there, rigidly, every sense on high alert. As the first pale light of dawn seeped through the curtains, I finally dozed off. The next morning, I debated whether to tell Lily what I'd seen. I didn't want to scare her or ruin our trip over what was probably nothing. So I kept quiet as we had breakfast and planned our day. We decided to go for a hike, following a trail that looped through the surrounding forest. It was a gorgeous fall day, crisp and sunny. For a while, I forgot all about the unsettling incident from the night before. We walked hand in hand, marveling at the vibrant foliage and stopping to take photos. But as we got deeper into the woods, that uneasy feeling started creeping back. I kept getting the sense we were being watched. Every time I turned around, I expected to see someone standing there, but there was never anything, just trees and shadows. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't help noticing how quiet it was. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just eerie silence. About halfway through our hike, we came to a small clearing. Lily wanted to stop for a snack and some water. As she rummaged in her backpack, I wandered to the edge of the clearing. That's when I saw them, footprints in the soft dirt. They didn't look like animal tracks. They looked human, and they were fresh. I called Lily over, my voice shaking slightly. "Hey, come look at this. Does this seem weird to you?" She crouched down to examine the prints. "That's so strange," she said, frowning. "Why would anyone else be out here? The cabin rental guy said we were the only guests for miles." A chill ran down my spine. I suddenly felt very exposed in that clearing. "Let's head back," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I think we've gone far enough for today." We hurried back along the trail, both of us quiet and tense. Every snapping twig made me flinch. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following us. When we finally reached the cabin, I breathed a sigh of relief. But as I climbed the porch steps, I froze. There, right in front of the door, was a muddy boot print. Lily gasped. "That wasn't there when we left, was it?" I shook my head slowly. My hands were trembling as I unlocked the door. We went inside and I immediately locked it behind us, checking twice to make sure it was secure. "What's going on?" Lily asked, her voice small and frightened. I told her about what I'd seen the night before, feeling guilty for not mentioning it earlier. "I'm sure there's a logical explanation," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "Maybe it's the property manager checking on things." But we both knew that didn't make sense. Why would they come in the middle of the night and not announce themselves? We spent the rest of the afternoon huddled inside, jumping at every little noise. As darkness fell, the fear became almost suffocating. Every shadow seemed menacing. Every creak of the cabin settling sounded like footsteps. We decided to call the local sheriff just to be safe. But when I tried my cell phone, there was no signal. The landline in the cabin was dead too. We were completely cut off. That night was the longest of my life. We took turns keeping watch, peering out the windows into the inky blackness. Several times I could have sworn I saw a figure moving out there, but it was always gone when I looked closer. Around 3 a.m., we heard it. Footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate. The floorboards creaking under someone's weight. My blood ran cold. Lily whimpered softly beside me. Then came a sound that nearly stopped my heart, the doorknob slowly turning. I had locked it, I was sure of it. But what if they had a key? The door didn't open, but a few seconds later, something slid under it, a piece of paper. With shaking hands, I retrieved it. Scrawled in messy handwriting were 5 words that made my stomach lurch. "I can see you watching." I dropped the paper like it was on fire. Lily started crying quietly. I held her close, my mind racing. What did they want? Why were they toying with us like this? We didn't sleep at all that night. When dawn finally broke, we packed our things in record time and fled. I've never driven so fast in my life. We went straight to the sheriff's office in the nearest town to report what had happened. They sent deputies out to investigate, but found nothing suspicious. No footprints, no sign of an intruder. The note was gone, too. They chalked it up to an overactive imagination and too many scary movies. But I know what we experienced was real. Sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat, certain I can hear those footsteps outside my bedroom. Lily and I are still together, but that trip changed something between us. There's a wariness now, a loss of innocence. I don't know who was out there in those woods or what they wanted. But I do know one thing. I'll never stay in a remote cabin again. Some places are meant to stay wild and empty, and sometimes the scariest monsters are the human ones. The first few days were blissful. I settled into a comfortable routine of writing, taking long walks in the surrounding fields and enjoying the stillness of country life. The cottage was charming, with its stone walls and thatched roof. My nearest neighbor was about a quarter-mile down the road, close enough if I needed help, but far enough away to maintain my solitude. It was on my 4th day there that I first noticed something odd. I was working at my desk by the window when movement caught my eye. I looked up to see a man standing at the edge of the property, partially hidden behind a tree. He was staring directly at the cottage. When he saw me looking, he didn't react or look away. He just kept staring with an unnervingly blank expression. After a few uncomfortable minutes, he turned and walked away. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, telling myself it was probably just a nosy local wondering about the new tenant. But over the next few days, I kept spotting the man. He would be standing in different locations around the perimeter of the property, always watching the house. Sometimes I'd see him multiple times a day. Other times he'd disappear for a while, only to show up again when I least expected it. His consistent presence was starting to really unnerve me. I decided to walk down to my neighbor's house to ask about the strange man. That's when I met Mr. Harris for the first time. He was an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, with thinning gray hair and pale, watery eyes. When I described the man I'd been seeing, Mr. Harris's expression darkened. "Oh, that'd be me," he said with an odd little smile. "Hope I didn't startle you. I like to keep an eye on things around here." I was taken aback. This was the man who had been lurking around my property. I stammered out some polite response and quickly excused myself, thoroughly unsettled by the encounter. As I walked back to my cottage, I could feel Mr. Harris's eyes boring into my back the entire way. From that day on, Mr. Harris's behavior grew increasingly disturbing. He no longer tried to hide his surveillance. He would stand boldly in my yard, mere feet from the windows, and stare inside for hours. If I went out, he would follow me at a distance. I started keeping all the curtains drawn and doors locked, but I could still sense his presence outside. One morning, I woke to find boot prints in the mud beneath my bedroom window. They weren't my size. With shaking hands, I called the local police to report a potential stalker. But when they came out to investigate, Mr. Harris was nowhere to be found. The officers were sympathetic, but said there wasn't much they could do without proof of an actual crime. They advised me to install security cameras and call again if anything else happened. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the old cottage made me jolt awake in terror. Around 3 a.m., I heard slow, heavy footsteps on the gravel path outside. They circled the house several times before stopping directly outside my bedroom. I lay frozen in bed, hardly daring to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated. The next day, I was a wreck. I couldn't focus on my writing at all. My hands shook as I tried to make coffee. That's when I noticed something on the kitchen table that made my blood run cold. It was a small scrap of paper with spidery handwriting on it. It said simply, "I'm always watching." I don't know how he got in. All the doors and windows had been locked. In a panic, I threw some clothes in a bag and fled to the nearest town. I got a room at a small inn and tried to calm myself down enough to think rationally. I knew I needed to end my rental agreement and get out of there for good. But first, I wanted to know more about Mr. Harris. I spent the day in the town library, searching old newspaper archives and talking to locals. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Over the past 40 years, there had been a string of disappearances in the area surrounding Mr. Harris's property. Young women mostly, all of whom had been renting the same cottage I was staying in. The police had investigated Mr. Harris multiple times, but never found enough evidence to charge him. As I dug deeper, I uncovered more disturbing details. Mr. Harris's wife had vanished without a trace shortly after they were married. He had been the prime suspect, but again, no charges were ever filed. There were whispered rumors about hidden rooms in his basement, about screams heard in the night, but no one had ever been able to prove anything. I knew then that I had to get out immediately. I didn't even want to go back to the cottage to collect my things. I called the owner and told her I was terminating the lease early due to an emergency. I'd forfeit my deposit. I didn't care. I just wanted to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. But Mr. Harris wasn't done with me yet. As I was loading my car to leave town, I spotted a familiar figure across the street. He was just standing there, staring at me with those pale, empty eyes. A chill ran down my spine. I got in my car and peeled out of there as fast as I could. For the next 100 miles, I kept checking my rearview mirror, terrified I'd see him following me. Even after I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I installed a security system and kept all my curtains drawn. For weeks, I jumped at every sound and shadow. It's been months now, and rationally, I know that Mr. Harris isn't still watching me. But the fear lingers. I've abandoned my novel. I can't bear to look at it after what happened. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I hear footsteps outside my window. The experience has shaken me to my core and destroyed my sense of safety. I don't know what Mr. Harris's true motives were. Was he just a lonely, disturbed old man? Or was he something far more sinister? I'll never know for certain. But I do know that I'll never again take my privacy and security for granted. The terror of those weeks in the cottage will stay with me forever. A stark reminder that sometimes the most mundane places can hide the darkest secrets. I probably should have pulled over, but I just wanted to get home. I lived out in a rural area, and this stretch of highway was dark and deserted, especially at this hour. As I rounded a bend, my headlights suddenly illuminated a figure on the side of the road. I slammed on my brakes, heart pounding as I skidded to a stop. There was a man stumbling along the shoulder, drenched and limping. He waved his arms frantically as I pulled up alongside him. Against my better judgment, I rolled down the passenger window a crack. "Please," he called out over the roar of the rain. "My car broke down a few miles back. I need help." I hesitated, torn between compassion and caution. He looked pathetic standing there in the downpour, and I felt guilty at the thought of leaving him stranded. But picking up a stranger on a lonely road in the middle of the night, that went against everything I'd ever been taught about safety. "I'm not dangerous, I swear," the man said as if reading my mind. "I'm just desperate to get out of this storm. Name's Mike. I'd be so grateful if you could give me a lift to the next town." Maybe it was the pleading tone in his voice, or the fact that I was exhausted and not thinking clearly. Whatever the reason, I made a decision I would come to regret. I reached over and unlocked the passenger door. "Hop in," I said. "I can take you as far as Millbrook." Mike scrambled into the car, water dripping everywhere. "Thank you so much," he said. "You're a lifesaver." As we drove off, I snuck glances at my new passenger. He was younger than I'd thought, probably in his late 20s, with shaggy dark hair plastered to his forehead. His clothes were ragged and mud-splattered. There was something slightly off about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. We rode in silence for a few minutes, nothing but the sound of rain and my squeaking wipers. I was starting to relax a bit when Mike suddenly spoke up. "So where you headed?" he asked. "Just going home," I replied cautiously. "Long day at work." "What kind of work you do?" I gave a vague answer about working in an office. For some reason, I didn't want to share too many personal details. "That's cool," Mike said. "Me, I've been between jobs lately. Times are tough, you know?" I nodded non-committally, keeping my eyes on the road. The hairs on the back of my neck were starting to stand up. Something about Mike's tone had shifted, becoming more intense. "Yeah, real tough," he continued. "A guy's got to do what he can to survive. You ever feel that way? Like you'd do anything?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, alarm bells going off in my head. "I suppose everyone struggles sometimes," I said neutrally. Mike let out a humorless laugh. "Struggles. Yeah, that's one way of putting it." My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. In the dim glow of the dashboard, I saw Mike reaching into his jacket. My breath caught in my throat as he pulled out a wicked-looking knife. "Here's how this is gonna go," he said, his voice suddenly cold and threatening. "You're gonna keep driving wherever I tell you. Try anything stupid and you'll regret it. Got it?" Terror coursed through me as the reality of the situation sunk in. I was trapped in a car with an armed madman, speeding down a deserted highway in the middle of a storm. How could I have been so naive? "Oh, okay," I stammered. "Just please don't hurt me. I'll do whatever you say." "Smart," Mike sneered. "Now take the next exit." My mind raced, trying to figure a way out of this nightmare. The next exit led deeper into the wilderness, away from any hope of help. Once we were truly isolated, who knew what this psycho had planned for me? As we approached the exit, a crazy idea struck me. It was risky, but it might be my only chance. "Which way at the fork?" I asked, gesturing ahead to where the exit split. Mike leaned forward to look, momentarily distracted. In that split second, I yanked the wheel hard to the right, sending us careening off the exit ramp. Mike yelled and tumbled against the door as we fishtailed on the wet pavement. The knife flew from his hand. I stomped on the gas, praying we wouldn't spin out completely. Somehow, I managed to wrestle the car under control as we shot down a narrow side road. Mike was cursing and fumbling for the knife. My heart pounding, I scanned desperately for any sign of civilization. Up ahead, I spotted a dim light through the trees. As we got closer, I saw it was coming from a small cabin. Without slowing down, I jerked the wheel and sent us bouncing down the muddy driveway. I slammed on the brakes, threw open my door, and tumbled out into the rain. "Help!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. "Somebody help me!" The cabin door flew open, and a man burst out, holding a shotgun. "What in tarnation?" "Please," I gasped. "He's got a knife. He was going to kill me." The man's eyes widened as he saw Mike struggling to get out of the passenger side. In an instant, he had the shotgun trained on him. "Don't move a muscle, boy," he growled, "unless you want a chest full of buckshot." Mike froze, hands in the air. I sagged with relief, feeling lightheaded. The next hour passed in a blur. The man, a local hunter named Tom, called the sheriff. Soon the quiet forest road was filled with flashing lights and uniformed officers. I gave my statement in a daze, still shaking from adrenaline and fear. As they loaded Mike into a cruiser, an officer approached me. "You're lucky," he said gravely. "This guy's wanted in 3 states. He's suspected in multiple assaults and at least 1 murder. If you hadn't gotten away when you did, he didn't need to finish the sentence." I nodded numbly, the full weight of what I'd narrowly escaped starting to sink in. It's been months since that rainy night, but I still have nightmares about Mike's cold eyes and that glinting knife. I've gone over and over it in my mind, cursing my own stupidity for picking up a stranger. If it weren't for some quick thinking and a huge dose of luck, I might not be here to tell this story. These days, I don't drive that highway anymore if I can help it. When I do, My doors stay firmly locked, and if I see someone on the side of the road, no matter how pitiful they look, I keep right on driving. Some lessons you only need to learn once. It had been raining heavily for hours as I drove down the deserted highway. My fuel gauge was dangerously low, and I was getting desperate to find a gas station. Just when I thought I'd have to pull over and wait out the storm, I spotted a dim light in the distance. As I got closer, I saw it was an old, run-down gas station. At that point, I was so relieved to find anywhere to refuel that I didn't care how sketchy it looked. I pulled up to the pump and got out of my car, the rain immediately soaking through my clothes. The place seemed abandoned at first. There were no other cars, and the small convenience store was dark except for a single flickering light inside. But as I approached the door, an elderly man suddenly appeared behind the counter, startling me. He smiled and waved me in. "Come on in out of that rain, son," he called in a friendly tone. I hesitated for a moment, but then hurried inside to escape the downpour. The store was musty and dimly lit, with dusty shelves holding expired snacks and faded magazines. The old man's smile seemed plastered on as he watched me from behind the counter. "Nasty night to be out driving," he said. "What brings you to these parts?" I explained I was just passing through and needed gas. He nodded, still grinning. "Well, you picked a fine night for it. Why don't you grab yourself a snack or something while I turn the pumps on for you?" I browsed the sad selection of stale chips and candy bars, grabbing a bottle of water mostly out of politeness. When I returned to the counter, the old man was still smiling that unnerving smile. "That'll be $40 even for the gas and water," he said. As I pulled out my wallet, I noticed his eyes following my every move. The hairs on the back of my neck started to stand up. Something felt very wrong. I handed him two $20 bills. His gnarled hand brushed against mine as he took the money, and I instinctively recoiled. His grin widened. "You know," he said slowly, "it's awful dangerous out there tonight. Maybe you ought to wait here till the storm passes." "Oh, that's okay," I said quickly. "I really need to get going." I turned to leave, but froze when I heard a loud click behind me. The old man had locked the door. My heart started racing as I spun back around. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. He was still smiling that horrifying smile. Now, he said. "No need to get all worked up. I'm just looking out for your safety is all. Why don't you come have a seat and we'll wait out this storm together?" I glanced around frantically, looking for another way out. The windows were barred, and the only other door I could see was behind the counter where the old man stood. "Please," I said, fighting to stay calm. "I appreciate your concern, but I really do need to leave now." The old man's demeanor suddenly changed. His smile vanished, replaced by a menacing glare. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, son," he growled. "You see, it gets awful lonely out here, and it's been far too long since I've had any company." Pure terror gripped me as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was trapped in this tiny store with a deranged old man who clearly had sinister intentions. My mind raced, searching for a way out. The old man started to come around the counter towards me. I backed away, knocking over a display of beef jerky. "Stay back!" I yelled, grabbing a can of beans off a shelf and holding it up like a weapon. He just laughed, a chilling sound. "Now what do you think you're going to do with that, boy?" He kept advancing, backing me into a corner. In desperation, I hurled the can at him as hard as I could. It struck him in the shoulder, causing him to stumble back with a grunt of pain. I seized the moment and made a dash for the counter, hoping to find something I could use to defend myself. The old man recovered quickly and lunged for me, but I vaulted over the counter just in time. I frantically searched for a weapon, anything I could use. My eyes landed on an old coffee pot on a dusty hot plate. Without hesitation, I grabbed it and swung it at the old man's head as he came around the counter. The pot shattered against his skull, sending shards of glass and scalding coffee everywhere. He howled in pain and fell to the floor, clutching his face. I knew this was my only chance. I sprinted to the back room, praying there would be another exit. To my immense relief, I spotted a small window near the ceiling. It was grimy and probably hadn't been opened in years, but it was my only hope. I could hear the old man cursing and stumbling to his feet in the other room. With adrenaline-fueled strength, I managed to force the rusty window open and pull myself through, scraping my arms and legs in the process. I tumbled to the muddy ground outside just as I heard the old man burst into the back room, screaming in rage. Without looking back, I scrambled to my feet and ran to my car, fumbling with my keys as the rain poured down. I finally got the door open and threw myself inside, locking the doors. As I started the engine, I saw the old man emerge from around the side of the building, his face bloody and contorted with fury. He charged towards my car, but I was already peeling out of the lot, tires squealing on the wet pavement. I sped down the highway, heart pounding, constantly checking my rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't being followed. It wasn't until I had put several miles between me and that nightmarish gas station that I finally allowed myself to breathe. When I reached the next town, I immediately went to the police station to report what had happened. They seemed skeptical at first, probably thinking I was some drunk making up stories. But when they saw the cuts and bruises on my arms from my escape through the window, they took me more seriously. They sent officers out to investigate, but by the time they reached the gas station, it was deserted. There was no sign of the old man, and the place looked like it had been abandoned for years. The only evidence of my ordeal was the shattered coffee pot and some bloodstains on the floor. The police did some digging and discovered that the gas station had officially been closed for over a decade. There were some local legends about strange occurrences there, but nothing concrete. They told me they would keep investigating, but I knew they probably wouldn't find anything. It's been months since that terrifying night, and I still have nightmares about that old man's twisted smile. I don't know if he was a ghost, a demon, or just a deranged person, but the memory of him still haunts me. I've never driven that stretch of highway again, and I doubt I ever will. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, if the stress of driving in the storm somehow caused me to hallucinate. But then I look at the scars on my arms from squeezing through that window, and I know it was real. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't managed to escape. I try not to think about it. All I know is that I'll never stop at an isolated gas station in the middle of the night again. And if I ever see an old man with an unnaturally wide smile, I'm running in the opposite direction as fast as I can. It was a dark and stormy evening, the kind where the rain comes down in sheets and visibility is near zero. I'd been making deliveries all night, grateful for the steady stream of orders keeping me busy. Around 11 p.m., I got a ping for an order to an address I didn't recognize in the industrial district. It seemed odd, but I figured maybe it was for some night shift workers or something. As I navigated the winding roads between warehouses and factories, an uneasy feeling started to creep over me. The streets were deserted, many of the buildings dark and abandoned looking. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating my surroundings before plunging everything back into darkness. I finally found the address, a large, dilapidated warehouse with boarded-up windows. There were a few vehicles parked outside, which gave me some relief. At least someone was there. I grabbed the food bag and jogged through the rain to a side door, eager to complete the delivery and get out of there. I knocked and waited, shivering as icy rainwater trickled down my neck. After a minute with no response, I tried the door handle. To my surprise, it was unlocked. I hesitated, but figured I'd just peek inside to see if anyone was around. "Hello," I called out as I cracked open the door. "Food delivery." The interior was dimly lit, and I could hear muffled voices coming from deeper inside. I took a few tentative steps in, squinting as my eyes adjusted to the gloom. That's when I saw them. A group of men huddled around some tables, stacks of cash and bags of white powder spread out in front of them. My blood ran cold as I realized what I'd stumbled into. Before I could react, one of the men looked up and locked eyes with me. Time seemed to freeze for a split second. "Hey, who the fucks are you?" he shouted, jolting everyone into action. Panic exploded in my chest. I dropped the food bag and bolted for the door, hearing angry yells and pounding footsteps behind me. I burst outside into the downpour, frantically scanning for my car. Lightning flashed again, and I spotted it about 50 yards away. I sprinted towards it, heart pounding in my ears. Just as I reached for the door handle, headlights suddenly blazed to life, blinding me. An engine roared and tires squealed as a vehicle came tearing around the corner of the warehouse. I yelped, abandoning my car and running in the opposite direction. I had no idea where I was going, just knew I had to get away. The sound of engines and shouting voices seemed to come from all directions as I darted between buildings. My lungs were burning, and my soaked clothes felt like lead weights. I spotted a narrow alley between two warehouses and ducked into it, praying it wasn't a dead end. The alley twisted and turned, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through in some spots. I emerged onto another street and paused for a second, gasping for breath. Headlights appeared at the far end, and I took off running again. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to escape this nightmare. I needed to find somewhere to hide, to catch my breath and think. As I rounded another corner, I saw a pile of discarded wooden pallets and cardboard boxes next to a dumpster. Without hesitation, I dove behind them, burrowing as deep as I could into the mess. I curled into a tight ball, trying to make myself as small as possible. Seconds later, a vehicle slowly cruised by. I held my breath, not daring to move a muscle. The car stopped, and I heard a door open, followed by footsteps splashing through puddles. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. "Where the hell did he go?" a gruff voice said nearby. "Check behind that dumpster." I squeezed my eyes shut, silently begging them not to find me. The footsteps came closer and closer. Just as I was certain I was about to be discovered, another voice called out from down the street. "Hey, I think I see him. He's heading towards the old paper mill." The footsteps immediately retreated, followed by slamming car doors and squealing tires. I stayed frozen in place, hardly daring to believe my luck. Only when the sound of engines had completely faded did I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. I don't know how long I stayed huddled there in the rain, shaking from cold and terror. Eventually, I managed to pull myself together enough to fish my phone out of my pocket with trembling hands. Miraculously, it still worked despite being soaked. I pulled up my GPS to try and figure out where the hell I was. To my immense relief, I saw a police station was only about half a mile away. I took a deep breath and peeked out from my hiding spot. The street seemed deserted. Moving as quietly as I could, I extracted myself from the pile of junk and set off in the direction of the police station. Every shadow made me flinch. Every sound had me ready to bolt, but somehow I made it without encountering anyone. I burst into the station, probably looking like a madman, soaked to the bone, wild-eyed and babbling about drug deals and being chased. The officers on duty were skeptical at first, but as I gradually managed to tell a more coherent version of events, they realized this was serious. Within minutes, squad cars were racing towards the warehouse. I collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. An officer draped a blanket over my shoulders and pressed a cup of coffee into my hands as I gave my official statement. The next few hours passed in a blur. More officers came and went. I overheard snatches of radio chatter about arrests being made and evidence seized. At some point, my family arrived, having been contacted by the police. Seeing their worried faces brought on a fresh wave of emotion as the reality of how close I'd come to disaster really sank in. Dawn was breaking by the time I was finally allowed to go home. As we drove away from the station, my mom kept squeezing my hand as if reassuring herself I was really there. My dad was uncharacteristically quiet, jaw clenched, as he focused on the road. I was utterly drained, but sleep proved elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those men's faces, heard the sounds of pursuit. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability, like at any moment someone might burst in seeking revenge. Over the next few days, the police kept me updated on the case. They'd arrested several members of a major drug trafficking ring and seized a huge quantity of narcotics and cash. I should have felt proud for helping bring them down, but mostly I just felt shaken and paranoid. I tried to go back to my normal routine but found myself jumping at every unexpected sound, checking over my shoulder constantly. The thought of making deliveries again, of going to unfamiliar places alone at night, filled me with dread. After a week of anxiety and sleepless nights, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I quit my delivery job, much to my parents' relief. They'd been gently trying to convince me to find something else anyway after what happened. It's been a couple months now, and I'm slowly starting to feel more like myself again. I still have nightmares sometimes, still get a jolt of fear when I see a vehicle that resembles the ones that chased me. But overall, I'm doing better. I've found a new job working days at a local garage. The routine and being around other people has helped a lot. I'm also seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of that night. Looking back, I still can't quite believe it all really happened. It was like something out of a movie, not the kind of thing you expect to encounter on a regular Tuesday night food delivery run. I'm incredibly grateful I made it out unharmed, but the experience has definitely changed me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of my surroundings. I appreciate the safety and comfort of home in a way I never did before, and I have a newfound respect for the risks that delivery drivers and other nighttime workers face. Sometimes I wonder about what might have happened if things had gone differently that night. If I hadn't found that hiding spot, or if they'd searched more thoroughly, or what if I'd arrived at the warehouse just a few minutes later or earlier. But I try not to dwell on the what-ifs too much. I'm focusing on moving forward and not letting fear control my life. Still, I don't think I'll ever look at a late-night food delivery quite the same way again. You never know what might be waiting on the other side of that door. The power had gone out about an hour earlier, plunging the entire neighborhood into darkness. I'd fumbled around for candles and flashlights, cursing myself for not being better prepared. Now I sat, huddled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, trying to distract myself by reading a book by candlelight. A particularly loud crack of thunder made me jump, nearly knocking over the candle on the end table. My nerves were already on edge from being alone in the dark house. I'd never been a fan of horror movies or haunted houses, and now I felt like I was living in one. I tried to focus on my book, but found myself constantly glancing up at the shadows dancing on the walls, cast by the flickering candlelight. Was that shadow always there? Did something just move in the hallway? I shook my head, trying to calm my overactive imagination. Just as I was starting to relax a bit, I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. It sounded like scraping, coming from the back door. My body went rigid as I strained my ears, hoping I'd imagined it. But there it was again, unmistakable this time. Someone was trying to get in. Panic seized me as I realized how vulnerable I was. Alone in a dark house, no power, no phone to call for help. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. Should I run, hide, try to confront whoever was out there? Before I could decide, I heard the distinct sound of the back door opening. Oh God, they were inside. My fight-or-flight response kicked in, and I sprinted for the front door. But in my panic, I misjudged where the furniture was in the darkness. I slammed my hip into the corner of the coffee table, crying out in pain as I stumbled. I heard footsteps behind me, getting closer. Desperation gave me strength, and I pushed myself up, ignoring the throbbing in my side. I made it to the entryway, my hands frantically searching for the doorknob in the dark. Just as my fingers closed around it, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I screamed and whirled around, lashing out blindly. My fist connected with something solid, and I heard a grunt of pain. The hand released me, and I wrenched the door open, prepared to run out into the storm. But a flash of lightning illuminated the porch, revealing a hooded figure blocking my escape route. I slammed the door shut and ran back into the living room, my mind racing. I was trapped between two intruders. The terror threatened to overwhelm me, but a surge of determination pushed through. I refused to go down without a fight. I grabbed the heavy glass vase off the mantel, wielding it like a club. The candlelight was just enough for me to make out a shadowy figure entering the room. Without hesitation, I swung the vase with all my strength. It connected with a sickening thud and shattered. The figure crumpled to the ground with a cry of pain. But I couldn't celebrate yet. I knew there was still another one in the house. I fumbled for the fireplace poker, my hands slick with sweat. The sound of footsteps from the hallway sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I pressed myself against the wall next to the doorway, ready to strike. The moment I saw movement, I swung. But the intruder was quicker than I expected. They dodged my attack and tackled me to the ground. The poker flew from my hand as we grappled on the floor. I fought with everything I had, scratching and punching and kicking. But my attacker was stronger, managing to pin me down. I could feel their hot breath on my face as they leaned in close. "Where is it?" a gruff voice demanded. "What?" I gasped out, confused. "The money. We know it's here somewhere." "Money? What money?" I had no idea what they were talking about. "I don't have any money," I cried. The pressure on my chest increased. "Don't lie to me, bitch. We know all about the inheritance. Now where is it?" Inheritance? It suddenly clicked. They must have me confused with my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. She'd recently inherited a large sum from her late husband, but I had no way to convince them they had the wrong house. A pained groan from across the room distracted my attacker for a moment. It was enough for me to get my knee up between us. I shoved with all my might, managing to throw them off balance. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the stairs, my only thought to put distance between us. I took the steps 2 at a time, my lungs burning. I made it to my bedroom and slammed the door, frantically searching for something to barricade it with. I shoved my dresser in front of the door, the adrenaline giving me strength I didn't know I had. I could hear heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. My eyes darted around the room, looking for a weapon, an escape route, anything. The window caught my attention. We were on the second floor, but there was a small overhang below that led to the porch roof. If I could make it out there, I might be able to climb down or jump to safety. I grabbed my bedside lamp, yanking it free from the wall. If they got through the door, I'd need something to defend myself. The dresser shuddered as someone slammed into the door from the other side. I let out an involuntary whimper, backing towards the window. Another loud thud, and I saw the dresser slide a few inches. With shaking hands, I managed to get the window open. Rain and wind immediately whipped into the room. I hesitated for a moment. It was a long way down, and the roof looked slippery. But another crash against the door made the decision for me. I climbed out onto the windowsill, clutching the lamp in one hand. The wind nearly knocked me off balance immediately. I inched my way onto the overhanging roof, the rough shingles scraping my bare feet. Just as I made it fully out the window, I heard a final crash from inside. They'd broken through. I didn't dare look back, focusing all my attention on not slipping off the roof. I made it to the edge, peering down at the ground below. It was too far to jump safely. I'd have to try to climb down using the trellis on the side of the house. I heard shouting from my bedroom window. They'd spotted me. With no time left to hesitate, I swung my leg over the edge of the roof, feeling for the trellis with my foot. My foot slipped on the rain-slick wood, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to fall. But I managed to catch myself, clinging to the trellis for dear life. I still had the lamp clutched in one hand, refusing to let go of my only weapon. I began to climb down as quickly as I dared, the rough wood digging into my hands and feet. I was about halfway down when I felt the trellis shudder. I looked up to see one of the intruders climbing out after me. Panic gave me speed, and I scrambled the rest of the way down. The moment my feet touched the ground, I took off running. I sprinted across my backyard, heading for my neighbor's house. I could hear pursuit behind me, but I didn't dare look back. My lungs were on fire and my legs felt like jelly, but terror kept me going. I made it to my neighbor's back porch and began pounding on the door. "Help! Please, someone help me!" I screamed, my voice hoarse. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, the porch light flicked on. The door opened to reveal my elderly neighbor, looking confused and concerned. "Good heavens, dear, what's wrong?" she asked. I pushed my way inside, slamming the door behind me. "Call the police!" I gasped out. "There are intruders in my house." Mrs. Johnson's eyes widened in alarm. She hurried to the phone while I collapsed onto a chair, my whole body shaking. The next hour passed in a blur. The police arrived, lights flashing and sirens blaring. They searched my house and the surrounding area, but found no sign of the intruders. The back door had definitely been forced open, and there was evidence of the struggle inside. But the men themselves had vanished into the night. I gave my statement to the police, still clutching the bedside lamp I'd carried with me the whole time. They praised my quick thinking and bravery, but all I felt was numb. Mrs. Johnson insisted I stay with her for the night. As I lay on her couch, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. My home no longer felt safe. Every creak and groan of the house made me flinch. The police never found the men who broke in that night. They told me it was likely a case of mistaken identity. The intruders had been after Mrs. Johnson's inheritance and gotten the wrong house. But that knowledge did little to ease my fears. I installed a security system the very next day. New locks, alarm, the works. But even now, months later, I still find myself checking and double-checking that everything is locked up tight each night. That storm took more than just the power that night. It took my sense of security, my peace of mind. I jump at shadows and loud noises. Every time the lights flicker, my heart races. I know I'm lucky to have survived. But part of me wonders if those men are still out there somewhere, waiting for another dark and stormy night to strike again. All I can do is stay vigilant and hope that my home truly is secure now. But deep down, I know I'll never feel completely safe here again. I was working late at the office, trying to finish up a big project before the weekend. It was already dark outside and a heavy storm had rolled in, with rain pelting against the windows. I glanced at the clock, 10:30 p.m. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. As I packed up my things, I felt a sense of unease. The building was eerily quiet, except for the sound of rain and occasional rumbles of thunder. I hurried to the elevator, wanting to get to my car as quickly as possible. When the elevator doors opened to the underground parking garage, I hesitated. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting strange shadows. I took a deep breath and stepped out, my heels clicking on the concrete as I walked briskly to my car. That's when I first noticed him, a tall figure in a dark coat, standing motionless between two parked cars about 50 feet away. My heart started racing. I fumbled for my keys, trying to look casual while picking up my pace. I glanced back and saw he had started walking in my direction. Panic gripped me. I broke into a run, no longer caring if I looked scared. I just needed to get to my car. The sound of heavy footsteps behind me spurred me to run faster. I reached my car and yanked on the door handle, my trembling hands struggling with the key fob. Why wouldn't it unlock? The footsteps were getting closer. Finally, the locks clicked open, and I dove inside, slamming the door shut. As I fumbled to start the engine, a massive blow struck the driver's side window. I screamed as I saw a hooded figure wielding a crowbar, smashing it against the glass again and again. Cracks spiderwebbed across the window. It wouldn't hold much longer. Sobbing in terror, I managed to get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the window shattered, sending shards of glass flying. A hand reached through the broken window, grasping for me. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it, tires squealing. The figure stumbled back as I careened out of the parking spot. My hands shook violently on the steering wheel as I sped through the garage toward the exit. In my rearview mirror, I could see the man sprinting after my car. Who was he? What did he want with me? I burst out of the parking garage into the rainy night, my windshield wipers working frantically. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I needed to get far away. The rain made it hard to see, and I narrowly avoided hitting other cars as I swerved through traffic. After driving aimlessly for what felt like hours, I found myself pulling into a police station parking lot. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, trying to calm my ragged breathing. Eventually, I worked up the courage to go inside and report what had happened. The police took my statement and sent officers to investigate the parking garage, but they found no sign of the attacker. They said they would review security footage, but warned me it might not show much in the dark garage. That was 3 months ago. They never found the man who attacked me. I've been jumpy and paranoid ever since that night. I can't be alone in parking garages or dark places. Every time I see a tall man in a dark coat, my heart starts racing. I don't work late anymore. I make sure to leave the office before dark, and I always ask a coworker to walk me to my car. But I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there somewhere, waiting. Sometimes at night, I wake up in a cold sweat. imagining I hear the sound of breaking glass. In my nightmares, I'm back in that parking garage, running from an endless darkness that's always just a step behind me. I keep wondering, why me? Was I targeted specifically, or was I just in the wrong place at the wrong time? What would have happened if I hadn't gotten my car started in time? The not knowing is almost worse than the attack itself. I've started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety and PTSD. She says it will take time to process the trauma, but how can I ever feel safe again when I know there's someone out there who wanted to hurt me? Every day is a struggle. I jump at sudden noises. I obsessively check the locks on my doors and windows. I've installed security cameras all around my house, but none of it makes me feel truly secure. The police say they're still investigating, but I can tell they've moved on to other cases. Without any leads or evidence, there's not much they can do. I'm left to deal with the aftermath on my own. I've thought about moving to a new city, starting over somewhere else. But I know the fear would follow me wherever I go. This experience has fundamentally changed how I see the world. I no longer feel safe anywhere. My friends and family try to be supportive, but I can tell they're getting frustrated with my constant anxiety. They don't understand why I can't just get over it and move on. But how can I when I know he's still out there? I've started taking self-defense classes, hoping it will help me feel more in control. But deep down, I know that if I ever encountered him again, I'd be paralyzed with fear. The memory of that night is seared into my mind. Sometimes I find myself obsessively replaying the attack, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Should I have left work earlier, parked in a different spot, asked someone to walk me to my car? The what-ifs are endless. I've become hyper-aware of my surroundings, always on guard for potential threats. In some ways, it's probably made me safer. But it's also exhausting to live in a constant state of vigilance. I miss the carefree person I used to be. The rational part of my brain knows that the chances of encountering my attacker again are slim. But the fear doesn't listen to reason. It's always there, lurking in the background, ready to overwhelm me at a moment's notice. I've started volunteering at a women's shelter, hoping that helping others might make me feel less helpless. It's been healing in some ways, but it also reinforces how prevalent violence against women really is. It's a sobering reality. As time passes, the acute terror of that night has faded somewhat, but in its place is a persistent anxiety that colors everything I do. Will I ever truly feel safe again, or has that illusion been shattered forever? I'm trying to focus on rebuilding my life, one day at a time. I'm working on setting small goals for myself, going out with friends, trying new activities, reclaiming some of the joy that was stolen from me that night. But I know I'll never be the same person I was before. That carefree, trusting woman is gone. In her place is someone more cautious, more cynical about the world. I grieve for my old self sometimes. I still have nightmares about the attack, but they're less frequent now. I'm learning coping mechanisms to manage my anxiety. Slowly, I'm starting to feel like I'm regaining control of my life, but I'll never forget the terror of that night in the parking garage. The sound of breaking glass, the glint of the crowbar, the pounding footsteps behind me. It's a part of me now, for better or worse. I don't know if I'll ever get closure. The mystery of who he was and why he targeted me may never be solved, but I'm determined not to let this experience define the rest of my life. I'm a survivor, not a victim, and someday I hope to feel truly safe again. Suddenly, my headlights illuminated a figure on the side of the road. A man was standing there, drenched to the bone, his arm outstretched in the universal sign for hitchhiking. I hesitated for a split second. Every instinct told me to keep driving, but I couldn't just leave someone stranded out here in this storm. Against my better judgment, I slowed down and pulled over to the shoulder. As I rolled down my window, the man rushed up to my car. "Oh, thank God," he said, relief evident in his voice. "My car broke down a few miles back and I've been walking for hours. Can you give me a lift to the next town?" I nodded and unlocked the passenger door. As soon as he climbed in, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something off about this guy, but I couldn't put my finger on what. He was average height and build, with nondescript features. His clothes were soaked through from the rain, but his eyes... There was an intensity there that made me deeply uneasy. "Thanks for stopping," he said as we pulled back onto the road. Not many people would pick up a stranger in the middle of nowhere. "No problem," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a nasty night to be stuck out here." We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the drumming of rain on the roof. I kept sneaking glances at my passenger out of the corner of my eye. He was sitting unnaturally still, staring straight ahead. Suddenly he turned to face me. "Pull over," he said flatly. "What? Why?" I asked, confusion and fear rising in my throat. "Pull over now," he repeated, his voice hard as steel. And then I saw the gun in his hand, pointed directly at me. My heart racing, I eased the car onto the shoulder and put it in park. "Look, just take my wallet in the car," I said, my voice shaking. "I won't cause any trouble." He laughed, a chilling sound devoid of any real humor. "I don't want your money or your piece of shit car," he sneered. "You're going to do exactly what I tell you, or I'll put a bullet in your head. Understand?" I nodded mutely, too terrified to speak. "Good. Now get out and open the trunk." On legs that felt like jelly, I stumbled out of the car into the pouring rain. I fumbled with my keys, finally managing to pop the trunk. The man got out and walked around to the back of the car, keeping the gun trained on me the whole time. "There's a truck stop about 10 miles up the road," he said. "You're going to drive us there. When we arrive, you'll do exactly as I say. One wrong move and you're dead. Got it?" I nodded again, rain streaming down my face and mingling with the cold sweat of fear. He tossed several large duffel bags into my trunk, then slammed it shut. "Let's go," he ordered, gesturing with the gun for me to get back in the driver's seat. As we drove, my mind raced frantically. Who was this man? What was in those bags? I had a sickening feeling I was being pulled into something very dangerous and illegal, but with the gun pointed at me, I had no choice but to comply. We pulled into the truck stop about 15 minutes later. It was deserted except for a few semis parked for the night. The man directed me to drive around to the back of the building, away from the lights and any prying eyes. "Park here," he instructed. "Now get out and open the trunk again." With shaking hands, I did as he said. He grabbed the duffel bags and slung them over his shoulder. "Walk," he said, gesturing towards a dilapidated storage shed at the edge of the property. As we approached, I saw several other men emerge from the shadows. My captor greeted them with curt nods, then tossed the bags at their feet. They quickly loaded the bags into a waiting van. One of the men turned to me with a cruel smile. "Looks like our courier did his job, but we can't have any loose ends, can we, boys?" My blood ran cold as I realized they were planning to kill me. I closed my eyes, waiting for the gunshot that would end my life. Instead, I felt a heavy blow to the back of my head. As consciousness faded, I heard one of them say, "Dump him in the woods. By the time he wakes up, we'll be long gone." I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, I was lying face down in the mud, rain still pouring down. My head throbbed, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. The mysterious hitchhiker, the gun, being forced to transport what I now realized must have been drugs or other contraband. Groaning, I pushed myself to my feet. I was in a densely wooded area with no sign of the road or the truck stop. My car keys were gone, along with my cell phone and wallet. I was alone, injured, and completely lost. I picked a direction at random and started walking. The storm had passed, but a heavy mist hung in the air, muffling all sound. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat. More than once, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, only to turn and find nothing there. After what felt like hours of stumbling through the darkness, I finally saw lights through the trees. I emerged onto the highway about a mile from the truck stop. My car was gone, of course. I walked to the truck stop, half expecting to find the criminals still there. But the place was quiet, with just a few drowsy truckers getting coffee inside. I must have looked like hell when I staggered in, muddy, bleeding, wild-eyed with fear and exhaustion. The girl behind the counter took one look at me and called 911. The police arrived quickly. I told them everything, fully expecting them to think I was crazy or on drugs. But as I spoke, their expressions grew grave. They said there had been several similar incidents in the area over the past few months. Lone drivers forced to act as unwitting drug mules, then left for dead in the woods. They took me to the hospital to get checked out, then to the station to give a formal statement. As I described the men I'd seen, one of the detectives let out a low whistle. "Sounds like you had a run-in with the coyotes," he said. "They're a notorious drug trafficking ring. We've been trying to bust them for years, but they're ghosts, always one step ahead of us." I spent the next several days in a state of perpetual anxiety, jumping at every sound and shadow. I was terrified the criminals would come back to silence me permanently. The police assured me they were keeping a close eye on me, but it did little to ease my fears. Weeks passed with no sign of the coyotes. Gradually, I started to relax and tried to put the terrifying experience behind me. I got a new car, changed jobs, even moved to a new city. But I never forgot that night on the lonely highway, or how close I came to death at the hands of those ruthless men. To this day, I'm haunted by unanswered questions. How did they choose me? Was I just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or had they been tracking me? And most chillingly, are they still out there, preying on other unsuspecting drivers? I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. I avoid driving alone at night whenever possible. Some might call me paranoid, but they haven't seen what I've seen. They don't know the evil that lurks on dark and lonely roads waiting for its next victim. So if you're ever driving late at night and see someone on the side of the road, just keep going. Don't stop, no matter how guilty you feel, because you never know who or what might be climbing into your car. And by the time you realize your mistake, it could already be too late. That night started like any other. I arrived at the park around 9 p.m., did my usual stretches, and set off on my usual route. The weather forecast had called for storms later, but the sky was still clear when I began my run. I figured I'd be done well before any rain started. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the wind picking up. Dark clouds were rolling in faster than expected. I debated cutting my run short, but decided to push on and complete my planned 10K. I'd run in the rain before. A little water wouldn't hurt me. As I rounded a bend in the path, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. 3 men were walking along a parallel trail, headed in the same direction as me. Something about them immediately set me on edge. They were moving with purpose, heads swiveling as if searching for something, or someone. I picked up my pace slightly, telling myself I was being paranoid. Plenty of people used the park at night. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. A few minutes later, I glanced back and saw the men had moved onto my trail and were definitely following me. They had spread out, trying to block potential escape routes. My heart began to race. This was no coincidence. I broke into a full sprint, veering off the main path onto a narrower dirt trail. I heard shouts behind me as the men realized I'd spotted them. Heavy footsteps pounded the ground as they gave chase. Panic flooded my system. Why were they after me? I didn't have anything valuable, just my phone and watch. My mind raced through horrible scenarios of what they might want. I pushed myself to run faster than I ever had before. The sky chose that moment to open up. Rain poured down in sheets, quickly turning the dirt path into slick mud. I slipped and stumbled, but somehow managed to keep my footing. My pursuers weren't so lucky. I heard a crash and cursing as one of them wiped out behind me. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the scene. In that moment of brightness, I spotted a small maintenance shed up ahead and veered towards it. It was my only hope for shelter and a hiding spot. I reached the shed just as another lightning bolt lit up the sky. The door was padlocked, but years of disuse had left the wood rotted. I slammed my shoulder into it repeatedly, praying it would give way before my pursuers caught up. On the 3rd try, the wood splintered and I tumbled inside. I quickly pulled the broken door closed behind me, wedging it shut with a nearby rake. Then I crouched in the darkest corner, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. Seconds later, I heard the men approaching. Their voices carried over the pounding rain. "Where'd he go?" "Check that building. He can't have gotten far in this storm." I held my breath as footsteps neared the shed. The door rattled as someone tried to open it. "It's locked," a gruff voice called out. "Break it down," another responded. My heart hammered in my chest as they began slamming against the door. The old wood creaked ominously. I looked around frantically for a weapon, anything to defend myself with, but the shed was nearly empty save for a few rusty tools. Just when I thought the door would give way, a new voice rang out. "Guys, forget it. The cops are coming. Someone called them about suspicious activity in the park. We gotta go." I sagged with relief as I heard them cursing and running off, but I didn't dare move from my hiding spot. What if it was a trick? For what felt like hours, I huddled in that dank shed, jumping at every sound. The storm raged on outside, wind howling through the trees. Each crash of thunder sent my heart racing anew. Eventually, the rain slowed to a drizzle. I strained my ears, but heard no signs of my pursuers. Cautiously, I crept to the door and peered out. The park seemed deserted. On shaky legs, I emerged from the shed. I was soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably. My phone was dead from the rain, leaving me with no way to call for help. I'd have to make it back to my car on my own. I stuck to the shadows, paranoia making me flinch at every rustle of leaves. When I finally reached the parking lot, I nearly wept with relief at the sight of my battered old Honda. As I drove home, my mind raced. Who were those men? What did they want with me? Had I simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or was I specifically targeted? I considered reporting it to the police, but what would I even say? I had no proof, no descriptions. They'd probably write it off as an overreaction to some harmless late-night joggers. In the days that followed, I found myself jumping at shadows, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. I tried to convince myself it was just lingering anxiety from the encounter. But deep down, a part of me wondered if those men were still out there, waiting for another chance. I stopped running at night after that. In fact, I avoided the park entirely for months. When I finally worked up the courage to return, it was only in broad daylight, surrounded by other people. Even then, my eyes constantly scanned for any sign of those three men. To this day, years later, I still get a chill down my spine when I think about that night. The what-ifs haunt me. What if I hadn't found that shed? What if they had caught me? What were their intentions? I'll never know for sure what really happened or why I was targeted. But one thing's for certain, I'll never take my safety for granted again. That night in the park taught me that danger can find you anywhere, even in the places you feel most secure. It's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I was an avid hiker, always seeking new trails and challenges in the great outdoors. Little did I know that my passion for nature would lead me into a terrifying ordeal that I'll never forget. It was supposed to be a routine day hike through a secluded forest area I hadn't explored before. The weather forecast had called for some rain later in the day, but I figured I'd be back well before then. I packed light, just some water, energy bars, and basic gear. As I set out on the trail that morning, the sky was overcast but calm. About 2 hours into my hike, the weather took a sudden turn. Dark clouds rolled in fast, and a light drizzle quickly became a heavy downpour. Thunder boomed overhead as the wind picked up, whipping through the trees. I realized I had seriously misjudged the storm's severity and timing. Visibility dropped to almost nothing as sheets of rain pelted down. The trail became a muddy mess, and I struggled to keep my footing on the slippery ground. My rain jacket was soon soaked through. Cold and disoriented, I knew I needed to find shelter fast before hypothermia set in. I veered off the main trail, pushing through dense underbrush in search of any kind of refuge from the storm. After what felt like an eternity of stumbling blindly through the woods, I caught a glimpse of something through the trees, the shadowy outline of a small structure. Relief washed over me as I approached what appeared to be an old hunting cabin. It was a rustic wooden building, weathered but still intact. I silently thanked whatever higher power had led me to this lifeline. As I got closer, I noticed there were no lights on inside. The place looked abandoned, which was fine by me. I just needed somewhere dry to wait out the storm. I tried the door and found it unlocked. Pushing it open, I gratefully stepped inside out of the downpour. The cabin's interior was dim and musty. It was sparsely furnished with some basic, worn-out furniture. A small table, a couple chairs, a threadbare couch. There was a stone fireplace along one wall, but no fire burning. The air felt damp and chilly. I shrugged off my sopping wet backpack and jacket, hanging them on a hook by the door. Water dripped steadily onto the worn wooden floorboards. I was shivering uncontrollably, my clothes clinging to my skin. My first priority was to get warm and dry. I started searching for anything I could use to make a fire. There was an old metal trunk in the corner that I hoped might contain some supplies. As I knelt down to open it, something caught my eye that made me freeze. Next to the trunk was a duffel bag that looked new and out of place among the cabin's run-down furnishings. My heart began to race as I realized I might not be alone here after all. I stood up slowly, straining my ears for any sound. but all I could hear was the pounding of rain on the roof and my own ragged breathing. I did a quick scan of the main room, but saw no other signs of recent occupation. There was a closed door that I assumed led to a bedroom. Fighting down a rising sense of panic, I crept towards it as quietly as I could. I placed my ear against the wood, listening intently. Nothing. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle and eased the door open a crack. The bedroom was empty, but what I saw inside made my blood run cold. Spread out on the bed were stacks of cash, bags of what looked like drugs, and several guns. This wasn't just some hunter's cabin. It was clearly being used for criminal activity, and whoever was involved could return at any moment. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. I couldn't go back outside in the storm, but staying here was incredibly dangerous. As I stood there paralyzed with indecision, I heard a sound that made my heart stop. Car engines approaching outside. Panic overwhelmed me. I looked around frantically for somewhere to hide. There was a wardrobe against the wall that looked just big enough to squeeze into. Without thinking, I yanked open the doors and crammed myself inside, pulling them shut behind me. I had barely gotten the doors closed when I heard voices and footsteps entering the cabin. At least 2 men from the sound of it. They were talking and laughing loudly, clearly not worried about being overheard. "Man, I can't believe how much cash we made off that last job," one of them said. "The boss is going to be real happy." "Yeah, and wait till you see what I got lined up next," the other replied. "Gonna be our biggest score yet." My pulse was pounding in my ears as I listened to them discussing their criminal exploits. I was terrified they would discover me at any moment. I tried to control my breathing, afraid even the slightest sound would give me away. The men moved into the bedroom where I was hiding. I could see them through a small crack between the wardrobe doors. One was tall and heavily muscled with tattoos covering his arms. The other was shorter but wiry, with a mean rat-like face. Both carried handguns tucked into their waistbands. They started sorting through the cash and drugs on the bed, dividing up shares and discussing plans for their next job. I gathered they were part of some larger criminal organization involved in theft, drug dealing, and who knows what else. "We got to move all this product fast," the tall one said. "Word is the feds are sniffing around. Boss wants everything cleared out by end of the week." "No problem," his partner replied. "I got buyers lined up ready to take it all. We'll be sitting pretty in no time." They continued talking for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20-30 minutes. I remained frozen in place, hardly daring to breathe. My muscles were cramping badly from being contorted in the cramped space, but the fear of discovery kept me absolutely still. Finally, the 2 men seemed to be wrapping up their business. They packed most of the cash and drugs into duffel bags, but left some behind along with the guns. "All right, let's get out of here," the tall one said. "We'll come back tomorrow to grab the rest of the gear." I heard them exit the bedroom and head for the front door. The sound of engines starting up outside. Then silence fell over the cabin once more. I waited several agonizing minutes to make sure they were really gone before slowly, painfully extracting myself from the wardrobe. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest as I straightened up. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything I'd just witnessed. I knew I had to get out of there immediately and contact the authorities, but a paralyzing fear gripped me. What if the men came back and caught me? What if there were others watching the cabin? I crept to the window and peered out. The rain had let up slightly, but it was still coming down steadily. Darkness had fallen while I was hiding, and I could barely see anything beyond the dim glow coming from the cabin. I gathered up my still damp gear with shaking hands. Taking a deep breath, I eased open the front door and stepped outside. The cool air hit me like a slap in the face after the stuffy confines of the wardrobe. I had no idea which direction I'd come from originally. In my panic to find shelter, I'd lost all sense of direction. I picked a direction at random and set off at a brisk pace, wanting to put as much distance between myself and the cabin as possible. The woods were pitch black and full of strange noises. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. My imagination ran wild, conjuring images of armed criminals lurking behind every tree. I stumbled frequently on the uneven ground, my legs weak and wobbly from being cramped for so long. After what felt like hours of frantic flight through the forest, I finally saw lights in the distance. As I got closer, I realized it was a small town. Relief flooded through me at the sight of civilization. I made my way to the local police station and reported everything I'd seen and heard at the cabin. The officers were initially skeptical of my wild story, but became very interested when I described the exact location and contents of the cabin. They immediately dispatched units to investigate. I later learned they were able to apprehend several members of a major drug trafficking ring based on the information I provided. The two men I'd overheard apparently escaped, but a large quantity of drugs and money was seized. It's been several months since that harrowing experience, but I still have nightmares about being trapped in that wardrobe, certain that at any moment I'll be discovered and killed. I haven't been able to bring myself to go hiking again. The thought of being alone in the woods now fills me with dread. I know I'm lucky to have escaped unharmed, but a part of me wonders if those criminals are still out there somewhere, angry about the bust and looking for revenge against the person who turned them in. I'm always looking over my shoulder now, unable to shake the feeling that danger could be lurking around any corner. I used to love the peace and solitude of nature. Now I find myself sticking to crowded city streets, drawing comfort from the constant presence of other people. I'm not sure I'll ever feel truly safe in the wilderness again after what happened in that cabin. Some experiences change you forever, leaving scars that never fully heal. The weather forecast had called for severe thunderstorms, and boy, they weren't kidding. By the time I arrived for my shift at 10 p.m., the rain was coming down in sheets. Lightning flashed across the sky every few minutes, followed by booming thunder that seemed to shake the entire building. I settled into my usual routine, making my rounds through the cavernous warehouse space. The place used to be a distribution center for some big retail chain, but it had been sitting empty for years. My job was basically just to make sure no one broke in or vandalized the place while the property owners tried to sell it. Around midnight, I was sitting in the small security office near the main entrance, sipping some lukewarm coffee and watching the storm rage outside. That's when I heard it, the sound of tires on gravel, barely audible over the pounding rain. My first thought was that it was probably just my relief showing up early, but then I realized it was multiple vehicles. I peered out the grimy window and saw 3 black SUVs pull up near the loading docks. A chill ran down my spine as I watched at least a dozen men pile out, all dressed in dark clothing. This was no routine visit. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. I wasn't armed. This was supposed to be an easy gig where nothing ever happened. I thought about making a run for my car, but they'd surely spot me. And even if I got out, I had no cell signal out here to call for help. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off all the lights in the office and crouched down behind the old metal desk, praying they wouldn't come this way. I could hear voices and footsteps echoing through the warehouse, getting louder. "Shipment comes in next week. We need to be ready, I heard a gruff voice say. What about the guard? Another man asked. My blood ran cold. They knew about me. Shouldn't be a problem. If he's even here, we'll take care of it, the first voice replied casually. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. The footsteps were right outside the office door now. I curled into a tight ball, willing myself to become invisible. The door creaked open and a beam of light swept across the room. I squeezed my eyes shut, certain I was about to be discovered. But after a moment, the door closed again. They moved on, their voices fading as they walked deeper into the warehouse. I let out the breath I'd been holding, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd be able to hear it. For the next hour, I stayed frozen in that position, straining to hear what was happening. From the fragments of conversation I could make out, it was clear these guys were into some serious criminal activity. Talk of shipments, payoffs, rival gangs. This wasn't just some small-time operation. As terrified as I was, I knew I had to try to gather some evidence. If I made it out of here alive, I wanted to make sure these bastards went down. So I pulled out my phone and started recording, hoping to catch some of what they were saying. Eventually, the voices started to move back towards the entrance. I heard car doors slamming, engines starting up, but I didn't dare move from my hiding spot until I was absolutely certain they were gone. Finally, after what felt like hours, I slowly uncurled myself and peeked out the window. The SUVs were gone. I let out a shaky sigh of relief, but I knew I wasn't out of danger yet. What if they left someone behind to watch the place? I had to get out of there, but I needed to be smart about it. I grabbed my flashlight and carefully made my way through the warehouse, checking every shadow and corner. My nerves were so frayed that every creak of the old building made me jump. When I was sure the place was clear, I bolted for my car. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I peeled out of the parking lot, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me. I drove straight to the police station, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. The officer at the desk must have thought I was crazy, bursting in there at 3 a.m., soaking wet and babbling about criminals in the warehouse. But when I played them the audio I'd recorded, their demeanor changed quickly. Within minutes, the place was buzzing with activity. Detectives were brought in, and I spent the next several hours going over every detail of what I'd seen and heard. They told me I'd stumbled onto a major operation they'd been trying to crack for months. By dawn, they had organized a raid on the warehouse. I watched from a safe distance as dozens of officers swarmed the place. In the end, they arrested over 20 people and seized a massive amount of drugs and weapons. The detective in charge told me that my information had been crucial in bringing down a dangerous criminal network. He said I'd probably saved lives. But honestly, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt lucky to be alive. It's been a few days now, and I'm still struggling to process everything that happened. I can't sleep without having nightmares about being discovered in that office. Every unexpected noise makes me jump. The police have me under protection until the trial, but I'm not sure I'll ever feel truly safe again. I keep replaying that night in my head, wondering what would have happened if I'd made one wrong move. If I'd sneezed, or if my phone had made a noise, or if I'd tried to run. I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. I've quit my job as a security guard. Hell, I'm not sure I'll ever work nights again. But I know one thing for certain. I'll never take an easy job for granted again. You never know when a routine night can turn into the most terrifying experience of your life. As I sit here writing this, part of me still can't believe it really happened. It feels like a bad dream I can't wake up from. But then I see the news reports about the bust. and I remember that it was all too real. I'm grateful to be alive, but I know it'll be a long time before I feel normal again. To anyone reading this, I guess the moral of the story is to always trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is hide and live to fight another day. I'm no hero. I'm just a guy who got lucky and managed to do the right thing in a terrifying situation. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'll never look at an empty warehouse the same way again. Stay safe out there, folks. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows. As I squinted through the darkness, I finally saw a sign for a motel up ahead. Thank God. I was exhausted and knew it wasn't safe to keep driving in these conditions. The neon vacancy sign flickered weakly as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. The place looked pretty run down, but I was just grateful for anywhere to crash for the night. As I hurried through the rain to the office, I noticed there were only a couple other cars in the lot. Not surprising given how remote this place was. The night clerk barely looked up from his phone as I checked in. He wordlessly handed me a key and pointed toward a row of rooms. I grabbed my overnight bag from the car and made my way to my room, eager to get out of my wet clothes and into bed. The room was about what I expected. Dated furnishings, slightly musty smell, thin walls, but the bed looked clean enough and there was hot water in the shower. I took a quick shower to warm up and was just settling into bed when I heard it. A woman's scream coming from the room next door. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but then I heard it again, along with the sound of something heavy hitting the wall. My heart started racing. Was someone being attacked? I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear. There was the muffled sound of a man's angry voice, then another cry from the woman. "Please stop," I heard her beg. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't just a couple having a loud argument. Someone was in real danger. But what could I do? I was just some random traveler, not a cop or anything. For a moment I considered just minding my own business, calling the front desk maybe. But then I heard the woman cry out in pain again, and I knew I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. But as soon as the operator answered, I realized there was no signal. The storm must have knocked out cell service. Shit. I paced the small room, trying to figure out what to do. The sounds from next door had quieted, but that almost made me more worried. What if I was too late? Finally, I took a deep breath and decided I had to at least try to help. I grabbed the ice bucket from my room as a pretense and quietly slipped out the door. As I approached the neighboring room, I could hear muffled sobbing. I raised my hand to knock, but hesitated. What exactly was I planning to do here? I had no weapon, no way to call for help. This was insane. But before I could change my mind, the door suddenly flew open. A large man with wild eyes glared down at me. "What the fuck do you want?" he snarled. I stammered something about getting ice, holding up the bucket with trembling hands. But as the man shifted, I caught a glimpse into the room behind him. A woman was huddled on the floor, her face streaked with tears and blood. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw the desperate plea there. I knew I couldn't walk away. "I heard screaming," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything okay in there?" The man's face twisted with rage. "Mind your own fucking business," he growled, moving to slam the door. But in that moment, some combination of adrenaline and sheer panic gave me a burst of courage. I shoved my foot in the doorway, preventing it from closing. I'm not leaving until I know she's all right, I insisted. The man lunged at me then, his meaty hands closing around my throat as he slammed me against the wall. Stars exploded behind my eyes as my head cracked against the plaster. I clawed desperately at his hands, gasping for air. Just when I thought I was about to pass out, I heard a dull thud, and the man's grip suddenly loosened. He crumpled to the ground, revealing the woman standing behind him, clutching a lamp. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she cried, rushing to my side as I slid down the wall, coughing and wheezing. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. "We need to get out of here," I managed to rasp out. The woman nodded frantically. "He'll kill us both when he wakes up. But my car, he took my keys." I grabbed her hand. "We'll take mine. Come on." We ran out into the pouring rain, not even bothering to grab our things. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the car unlocked. Just as we climbed inside, I saw the man stagger out of the room, blood streaming down his face. He roared with rage when he spotted us and started sprinting toward the car. I jammed the key in the ignition, silently begging the engine to turn over. It sputtered once, twice. The man was getting closer, murder in his eyes. Finally, the engine roared to life. I threw the car in reverse and stomped on the gas, tires squealing as we fishtailed out of the parking lot. The man's enraged shouts faded as we sped off into the night. We drove in tense silence for several minutes, both of us still in shock. Finally, the woman spoke quietly. "Thank you. You saved my life." I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white. "What happened back there? Who was that man?" She took a shuddering breath. "My ex. He found out where I was staying, showed up drunk and angry. Said if he couldn't have me, no one could." Her voice broke on a sob. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "It's over now. You're safe." We drove through the night, the storm gradually lessening as we put more distance between us and that nightmare motel. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, we finally saw signs for a town up ahead. I pulled into the parking lot of the local police station, both of us exhaling in relief. I asked gently. She nodded gratefully. "Please, I don't think I can do this alone." As we walked into the station together, I marveled at how differently this night had turned out than I'd expected. I'd set out on a simple road trip and somehow ended up in the middle of a horror movie. But looking at the brave woman beside me, I knew I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Sometimes being in the wrong place at the right time is exactly where you're meant to be. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID but didn't recognize the number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but for some reason I felt compelled to answer. "Hello?" I said hesitantly. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then a gravelly male voice spoke. "Hello, Jenna. Working late again, I see." A chill ran down my spine. How did this person know my name and that I was working? "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The man chuckled softly. "Oh, Jenna, always so direct. That's what I like about you." "Look, I don't know who you are, but—" He cut me off. "I know a lot about you, Jenna. I know you're sitting in your home office right now in that ratty old university sweatshirt you refuse to throw away. I know you ordered Thai food for dinner, Pad See You, your favorite. And I know about that little secret you've been keeping from your husband." My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know all those details? About my sweatshirt, my dinner, No, it wasn't possible. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" I snapped. "Because it's not funny. I'm hanging up now, and if you call again, I'm contacting the police." "Go ahead," the man said calmly. But we both know you won't. You have too much to lose if certain things came to light. Sleep tight, Jenna. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. I sat there frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. This had to be some elaborate prank, right? But how would a random prankster know such specific details about my life? About things I'd never told anyone? I tried to shake it off and get back to work, but I couldn't focus. My eyes kept darting to the windows, searching the darkness outside. After about 20 minutes, my phone rang again. Same unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Stop calling me," I hissed. Now, is that any way to talk to an old friend?" The man's voice purred. "I'm hurt, Jenna. Here I am just trying to have a friendly chat." "We are not friends," I said firmly. "I don't know who you are or how you got this information about me, but I want you to leave me alone." He tisked disapprovingly. "Come on, Jenna. Don't be like that. We're just getting started. Tell me, does your husband know about your little indiscretion last month with his brother of all people?" Tsk, tsk. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. There was no way he could know about that. No one knew. I'd never breathed a word to anyone. How?" I stammered. "I have my ways," he said smugly. "I know all sorts of interesting things about you, Jenna. Things you thought were safely hidden away. But nothing stays buried forever, does it?" Anger flared up, overriding my fear for a moment. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "Money? Is that it?" He laughed, a chilling sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Jenna, I don't want your money. I just want to play a little game. See how long it takes before you crack, before the guilt and fear eat you alive." "You're insane," I whispered. "Maybe," he agreed. "But I'm not the one with skeletons in my closet, am I? Sweet dreams, Jenna. I'll call again soon." He hung up. I immediately blocked the number, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of nightmare. I got up and started pacing, trying to calm myself down. It was just a sick prank, I told myself. Some creep who had somehow gotten some personal information about me and was trying to scare me. I should call the police. But what if it wasn't a prank? What if he really did know about... No, I couldn't risk it. I couldn't let anyone find out what I'd done. A loud crack of thunder made me jump. "Get it together, Jenna," I scolded myself. "You're letting this freak get in your head." I forced myself to sit back down at my desk and try to work. But I couldn't concentrate. Every little noise made me flinch. The storm outside seemed to grow more intense, wind shrieking around the house. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. "Look outside." My heart leapt into my throat. With trembling legs, I walked to the window and peered out into the rain-lashed darkness. At first I didn't see anything, but then a flash of lightning illuminated the yard for a split second, and I saw them, muddy footprints leading up to the house. I stumbled backwards. A scream lodged in my throat. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. Another text. "I'm closer than you think, Jenna." Panic exploded in my chest. I ran through the house, checking that all the doors and windows were locked. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, clutching it so hard my knuckles turned white. Back in my office, I huddled in the corner, my eyes darting wildly around the room. The power flickered, plunging me into darkness for a terrifying moment before coming back on. My phone rang again. I knew I shouldn't answer, but I felt compelled, like a mouse hypnotized by a snake. What do you want from me?" I whispered. "I want you to suffer," the voice growled. "I want you to feel the pain of knowing your darkest secrets are about to be exposed. I want you to experience true fear. Please," I begged, "I'll do anything. Just leave me alone." He laughed cruelly. "Oh, Jenna, you don't get it, do you? This is just the beginning. I'm going to destroy your life piece by piece, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." A loud bang from downstairs made me scream and drop the phone. Oh God, he was in the house. I scrambled to my feet, knife clutched to my chest. I had to get out of here, had to run. But as I reached for the door handle, I froze. What if he was waiting for me out there? What if this was all part of his sick game? Another bang, closer this time. I whimpered, pressing myself against the wall. This was it. He was coming for me. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Jenna, are you okay?" I blinked in confusion. That sounded like, "Jenna, where are you?" My husband. It was my husband's voice. Relief flooded through me. "Up here," I called out shakily. "In the office." I heard footsteps on the stairs. Then Mark appeared in the doorway. "Jesus, Jenna, what happened? Why are all the lights off downstairs? And why are you holding a knife?" I burst into tears, dropping the knife and flinging myself into his arms. Between sobs, I managed to explain about the phone calls, the texts, the footprints outside. Mark listened with growing concern. When I finished, he hugged me tightly. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm here. Let's call the police, okay?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. As Mark took out his phone to dial, I glanced at mine. There was one new text message. "Until next time, Jenna." I shuddered and deleted it. It was over. The police would come. They'd investigate. And this nightmare would be behind me. But as I watched Mark talking to the 911 operator, a tiny seed of doubt took root in my mind. How had the caller known so much about me, about things no one else could possibly know? And most importantly, how could I be sure it was really over? The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They took my statement and searched the property, but found no sign of an intruder. The muddy footprints I'd seen were gone, washed away by the rain, the officers said. They promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood and gave me a card with the number for victim support services. But I could tell they didn't really believe me. They probably thought I was just some hysterical woman who'd let her imagination run wild during a storm. Mark was supportive, but I could sense his skepticism too. He gently suggested that maybe I'd been working too hard lately, that stress could do funny things to a person's mind. I wanted to believe that was all it was, that I'd somehow hallucinated the whole thing, conjured up some bogeyman from my own guilty conscience. But deep down, I knew the truth. Those calls had been real. That voice had been real. And the things he knew, God, the things he knew. I lay awake all night, jumping at every little sound. Mark slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to the turmoil in my mind. I kept replaying the caller's words over and over. This is just the beginning. What did that mean? Was he really going to follow through on his threats, expose my secrets, destroy my life? As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had to do something. I carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Mark. In my office, I booted up my laptop and started searching. Private investigators, cybersecurity experts, anyone who might be able to help me track down my tormentor. I would find out who he was. I would stop him. And I would make sure my secrets stayed buried, no matter what it took. But even as I furiously typed and clicked, a part of me wondered, was I just digging myself in deeper? Was this exactly what he wanted me to do? The storm had passed, but I knew in my bones that this was just the calm before an even greater tempest. Whatever game this man was playing, I was trapped in it now. All I could do was try to stay one step ahead and pray that when it was all over, I'd still have something left of my life to salvage. As the sun rose on a new day, I steeled myself for whatever was to come. Let him try his worst, I thought grimly. I'm not going down without a fight. But even as I tried to bolster my courage, a chill ran down my spine. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, a small voice whispered, "What if he's watching me right now?" I arrived on a gloomy afternoon in late autumn. The caretaker gave me a quick tour before handing over the keys and driving off, leaving me truly alone. I spent that first day settling in, unpacking my laptop and notes, getting a feel for the place. It was an old farmhouse, all creaky floorboards and drafty windows. But it had character, and I could already feel my creative juices flowing. As night fell, I built a fire in the massive stone fireplace and settled in with my writing. The wind was picking up outside, rustling through the trees and rattling the shutters. I found the sound oddly soothing as I typed away, lost in my fictional world. It must have been close to midnight when the first drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes, it had turned into a full-on downpour. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in brief, stark bursts. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance. I was just thinking about calling it a night when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a creak of floorboards from somewhere in the house. I froze, fingers hovering over my keyboard. Had I imagined it? But no, there it was again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My heart began to race. I was supposed to be alone out here. The caretaker wasn't due back for days. I stood up slowly, straining my ears. Another creak, closer this time, and then a whispered voice. "Check upstairs." Panic seized me. There were people in the house, multiple people, and they didn't know I was here. I looked around frantically, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. The storm was raging outside now, rain lashing against the windows. Running blindly into the night didn't seem like a great option, but neither did confronting whoever was creeping through the house. That's when I noticed something odd about the fireplace. One of the stones seemed slightly out of place. With shaking hands, I reached out and pressed it. To my amazement, a section of the hearth swung open, revealing a narrow passageway. I didn't hesitate. Grabbing my phone, I squeezed into the passage, pulling the secret door closed behind me. It was pitch black inside. I fumbled with my phone, trying to turn on the flashlight without dropping it. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely manage it. Finally, a beam of light illuminated rough stone walls, stretching away into darkness. I started moving, having no idea where this tunnel might lead, but knowing I couldn't stay put. The passageway sloped gently downward. I could hear water dripping somewhere ahead. I don't know how long I stumbled through that cramped, dank tunnel. It felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. All I could think about were the intruders above, wondering if they'd discovered my hiding place. Every sound made me jump. Was that footsteps behind me? A voice calling out? Just when I thought I couldn't take the darkness and uncertainty any longer, I saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Hardly daring to hope, I pressed forward. The passageway opened up into a small cave, and there, unbelievably, was an old wooden door. I yanked it open and tumbled out into the raging storm. The rain was coming down in sheets, instantly soaking me to the skin. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating my surroundings. I was in some kind of overgrown garden, thick with brambles and weeds. The tunnel had led me out behind the house. For a moment I just stood there, gasping for breath, the rain pelting my face. Then survival instinct kicked in. I had to get away, find help. I started running, stumbling through the waterlogged grounds. Branches whipped at my face and arms. Mud sucked at my feet with every step. I had no idea which direction I was going. The storm made it impossible to get my bearings. I just ran blindly, driven by terror and adrenaline. Several times I fell, sprawling face first into puddles or tangled undergrowth. But each time I scrambled back up, spurred on by the fear of what or who might be behind me. After what felt like an eternity of stumbling through the tempest, I saw a light in the distance. At first, I thought it was another lightning flash, but it remained steady, gleaming like a beacon of hope through the rain. Summoning the last of my strength, I staggered towards it. As I drew closer, I could make out the shape of a house, smaller than the one I'd fled, but blessedly real and solid. I practically fell against the front door, pounding with both fists and shouting hoarsely to be heard over the storm. Long seconds ticked by. I was about to start hammering again when the porch light flickered on. The door creaked open, and I found myself face to face with an elderly man peering out suspiciously. "Please," I gasped, "I need help. There are intruders in the old farmhouse up the road. I barely escaped." The man's eyes widened. Without a word, he ushered me inside. The sudden warmth and dryness was almost overwhelming after my ordeal in the storm. I swayed on my feet, dripping rainwater onto the worn floorboards. "Martha," the old man called. "Bring some towels and call the sheriff." The next hour passed in a blur. The old couple, Frank and Martha, got me dried off and into some spare clothes. They plied me with hot tea as I haltingly recounted my terrifying experience. Frank called the police, relaying what had happened. It felt surreal sitting in their cozy kitchen while the storm raged outside. Part of me still expected to wake up and find it had all been a nightmare. But the aches in my body and the tremor in my hands were all too real. We waited tensely for what felt like hours. Occasionally, headlights would sweep across the windows, making us all jump. But it was just the wind blowing tree branches around. Finally, there was a pounding at the door. Frank went to answer it, and I heard the reassuring sound of official voices. 2 sheriff's deputies entered, looking grim and professional despite being soaked to the skin. They took my statement, asking for every detail I could remember. I told them about hearing the intruders, finding the secret passage, my harrowing journey through the storm. They nodded gravely, taking notes. "We've got units heading to the farmhouse now," one of the deputies said. "But in this weather, it'll take them a while to get there. You did the right thing getting yourself to safety and calling us." I sagged with relief. It was over. I was safe. The authorities would handle things from here, but the night wasn't quite done with its surprises. As dawn was breaking, the storm finally began to subside. That's when we heard the approaching sirens. Frank, Martha, and I crowded around the window, watching as a procession of police cars and an ambulance went roaring past, lights flashing. About an hour later, one of the deputies returned. He looked tired, but satisfied. "We got 'em," he announced. 4 men caught red-handed trying to load valuables into a van. Turns out they're part of a gang that's been hitting isolated properties all across the county. They thought the place was empty, got one hell of a shock when they realized someone was there. I felt a chill run down my spine, thinking how differently things could have gone if I hadn't found that secret passage. The deputy must have noticed my expression. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "These guys have a history of violence. Finding that hidden tunnel might just have saved your life." In the days that followed, I learned more about the old farmhouse and its secret passage. Apparently, it dated back to Prohibition, when the place had been used to manufacture and smuggle illegal alcohol. The tunnel had been an escape route in case of raids. I gave my official statement to the police, identified the intruders in a lineup, even did a brief interview for the local news. But as the excitement died down and life began to return to normal, I found myself struggling to process what had happened. I abandoned my plans to finish my novel at the farmhouse. Somehow, I don't think I could ever feel safe there again. But strangely enough, the experience sparked a new idea for a book, one based on my own harrowing night of terror and escape. Sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced I can hear footsteps creeping through my house. In those moments, the fear feels as fresh and raw as it did that stormy night. But then I remind myself that I survived. I outsmarted them. I escaped. And in a weird way, I'm grateful for the experience. It showed me what I'm capable of when pushed to the brink. It gave me a story to tell, one that's all too real. It was supposed to be a routine weekend trip to a secluded forest area I'd never explored before. The weather forecast looked clear, so I packed light and set off early Friday morning. After a long drive down winding country roads, I finally reached the trailhead around midday. The hike in was beautiful, towering trees, bird song, and that crisp scent of pine needles in the air. I found a small clearing a few miles in that seemed perfect for setting up camp. As I pitched my tent and got a fire going, I felt that familiar sense of peace wash over me. This was why I loved getting away from it all. As night fell, I noticed some ominous clouds rolling in. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. Before long, fat raindrops began to fall. Within minutes, it had turned into a full-on downpour. Lightning flashed, followed by booming thunder that seemed to shake the ground. I huddled in my tent, hoping it would pass quickly. But the storm only intensified. Water began seeping in through the seams of my tent. The wind howled, threatening to rip the stakes right out of the ground. I realized I needed to find better shelter, and fast. Grabbing my flashlight and rain jacket, I ventured out into the deluge. The beam of light barely penetrated the darkness as I stumbled through the woods. My boots squelched in the mud with every step. I was instantly drenched to the bone, shivering as icy rainwater trickled down my back. After what felt like an eternity of wandering, a flash of lightning illuminated a large structure in the distance. Squinting through the rain, I made out the shape of an old barn. Thank God, I thought, any port in a storm. I slogged through the muddy field towards the barn. As I got closer, I could see it was in a state of disrepair. Weathered gray boards, missing roof shingles. But it was still standing, and that's all that mattered. I found a side door that was slightly ajar and slipped inside. The musty smell of damp hay and rotting wood assaulted my nostrils as I entered. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing rusted farm equipment and piles of moldering straw. Water dripped steadily from holes in the roof, but it was dry enough, and I was grateful for the reprieve from the elements. I found a relatively clean patch of floor and sank down, exhausted. The storm continued to rage outside, wind whistling through gaps in the walls. I figured I'd wait it out here and head back to my campsite once it passed. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I began to take in more details of my surroundings. That's when I noticed something odd, signs that someone had been here recently. There were fresh boot prints in the dust. A lantern sat on an old workbench, its wick freshly trimmed. And strangest of all, I spotted what looked like scratch marks on the inside of the door, A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. Who else would be out here? And why would they lock themselves inside? I told myself I was being paranoid. Probably just some other hikers who'd taken shelter here recently. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. I found myself straining to hear any sounds beyond the pounding rain and howling wind. That's when I heard it, a soft scraping noise coming from the hayloft above. I froze, hardly daring to breathe. It could have been a rat or some other small animal, but then I heard it again, louder this time. Deliberate, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My heart began to race. I wasn't alone in here. I slowly got to my feet, trying not to make a sound. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was it just another hiker, a dangerous fugitive, some deranged killer? The footsteps moved again, crossing to the other side of the loft. A loud creak echoed through the barn as weight settled on an old board. I backed away towards the door, prepared to bolt at any moment. Suddenly, my flashlight beam caught movement. A dark shape peered down from the edge of the hayloft. I caught a glimpse of wild eyes reflecting in the light before the figure ducked back into the shadows with inhuman speed. Terror seized me. That was no person. Whatever was up there, it wasn't human. I turned and ran for the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the latch. Just as I got it open, I heard a thud behind me. It had jumped down from the loft. I didn't look back as I burst out into the storm. The rain lashed at my face as I sprinted across the field, my boots slipping in the mud. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the barn behind me. I thought I saw a dark shape in the doorway, but I didn't slow down to check. I ran blindly through the woods, branches whipping at my face. Several times I lost my footing on the slick ground, crashing to my hands and knees, but terror drove me on. I didn't stop until I finally stumbled back into my campsite, gasping for breath. My tent was a sodden mess, partially collapsed from the wind. I didn't care. I grabbed my backpack and car keys, leaving everything else behind. It wasn't until I was in my car, tires spinning on the muddy access road, that I allowed myself to relax slightly. As I sped down the mountain, my mind raced. What the hell had I seen in that barn? The rational part of my brain tried to come up with explanations. A homeless person, a wild animal, a trick of the light, and my own fear. But deep down, I knew it was something else, something that defied explanation. I drove straight through the night, not stopping until I was safely back in the city. For weeks afterwards, I jumped at every shadow and strange noise. I kept expecting to see those feral eyes staring at me from dark corners. I've never gone camping alone again. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, if the stress and the storm played tricks on my mind. But then I remember the visceral terror I felt in that moment, the way that thing moved, the inhuman glint in its eyes. Whatever was in that barn that night, it wasn't anything natural, and I thank my lucky stars I made it out of there alive. That's when I saw him, a lone figure stumbling along the side of the road, hunched over against the wind and rain. Even through the downpour, I could tell something was wrong. His gait was unsteady, and he seemed to be clutching his side. My nurse instincts kicked in immediately. I couldn't just leave someone out here in this weather, especially if they were injured. I slowed down and pulled over, rolling down my window. "Hey, are you all right? Do you need help?" I called out. The man looked up, rainwater streaming down his face. He appeared to be in his 30s, with dark hair plastered to his forehead. "Please," he gasped. "I need to get to the hospital." Without hesitation, I unlocked the doors. "Get in. I'll take you. I'm a nurse." He stumbled to the passenger side and collapsed into the seat, dripping water everywhere. I didn't care about my upholstery at that moment. I was focused on assessing his condition. "What happened? Where are you hurt?" "Car crash," he mumbled, still holding his side. "Think I might have some broken ribs." I nodded, turning the heat up. "Okay, just try to stay still. We'll get you checked out soon." I pulled back onto the road, squinting through the rain. The nearest hospital was about 30 minutes away in good weather. In this storm, who knew how long it would take? As we drove, I kept glancing over at my passenger. Something felt off. His breathing seemed too steady for someone with broken ribs, and he wasn't wincing or gasping in pain when we hit bumps in the road. Years of experience had honed my instincts, and right now they were screaming that something wasn't right. "So, where exactly did the crash happen?" I asked casually, trying to get more information. He hesitated a beat too long before answering. Back there a ways. Ran off the road in the rain." "Did you call for help? An ambulance?" "No service out here," he muttered. I nodded, my unease growing. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the pounding rain and swish of the wipers. I was hyper-aware of every move he made. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his hand slowly moving towards his jacket pocket. My heart started racing. What was he reaching for? A phone? A weapon? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "what's your name?" He paused again before answering. "John." "Well, John, I'm Alice. Don't worry. We'll get you taken care of soon." As I spoke, I saw his hand emerge from his pocket. My blood ran cold as I caught a glimpse of metal. A knife. He was holding a knife. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. My mind raced through scenarios, weighing options. I could try to grab the knife, but that would mean taking my hands off the wheel in this storm. I could slam on the brakes, but on these wet roads we'd likely crash. I could speed up, but where would I go? I forced myself to stay calm, to think rationally. Right now, he hadn't made any overt threats. Maybe if I played dumb, acted like I hadn't noticed anything amiss, I could buy some time. "So, John," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded, "what do you do for work?" He seemed thrown off by the casual question. Construction," he mumbled. I nodded, as if this was a perfectly normal conversation. "Oh, interesting. My brother's in construction, too. Which company are you with?" As I peppered him with mundane questions, I was frantically trying to come up with a plan. The nearest town was still at least 20 minutes away? Too far? But wait, wasn't there a police station coming up soon? Yes, I remembered passing it on my way to work sometimes. It couldn't be more than 5 minutes ahead. I just had to keep him talking, keep him off balance until we got there. "So, John, are you married? Any kids?" He grunted non-committally, clearly growing impatient with my chatter. I saw his hand tighten on the knife. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he must be able to hear it. I babbled on about anything I could think of. The weather, my job at the hospital, my cat. All the while, I was watching the road intently, praying to see the lights of the police station. Finally, mercifully, I spotted it up ahead. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by fear. How was I going to pull in without him realizing where we were? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it, my one chance. "Oh no," I said suddenly. "I think we have a flat tire." I started to slow down, pulling off to the side of the road. "What?" "No, keep going," John said sharply. "I'm sorry, I have to check." It could be dangerous to keep driving if we have a flat in this weather. I pulled into the police station parking lot, my hands shaking as I put the car in park. John looked around, suddenly realizing where we were. "What the hell? This isn't the hospital." I saw fury and panic flash in his eyes. He raised the knife. "Drive. Now." Instead, I yanked the keys from the ignition and threw them out my window into the rain-soaked night. Then I threw open my door and ran. I heard him cursing behind me as I sprinted towards the station entrance, rain lashing my face. "Help!" I screamed. "Help me!" The door burst open and 2 officers rushed out, weapons drawn. "Freeze! Drop the weapon!" I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath as the adrenaline drained from my body. I heard scuffling behind me, then the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. The next few hours passed in a blur. I gave my statement to the police, my voice shaking as I recounted what had happened. They told me the man, whose real name wasn't John, was a suspected serial killer who had been targeting women in the area. He would pretend to be injured to lure in good Samaritans, then attack them. I had likely been his next intended victim. When I finally got home that night, I couldn't stop shaking. I checked and rechecked that all my doors and windows were locked. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that knife glinting in the darkness. It's been months now, but I still haven't fully recovered from that night. I jump at every unexpected sound. I can't drive alone at night anymore. I've started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety and PTSD. But I also feel a strange sense of pride. I trusted my instincts, kept my cool, and outsmarted a killer. I saved my own life that night, and possibly the lives of future victims too. Still, I often find myself wondering, what if I hadn't stopped? What if I had just driven past, too tired to care about a stranger in the rain? I'd be safely at home, untraumatized, blissfully unaware of how close I'd come to danger. But then I remember what I learned in nursing school. We have a duty to help those in need. It's a core part of who I am. I couldn't have just driven by. And despite everything, I know that if I had to do it all over again, I'd still stop to help. I just hope I never have to make that choice again. These days I keep pepper spray in my car and take self-defense classes. I'm more cautious, more aware of my surroundings, but I refuse to let fear rule my life. I'm a survivor, and I'm stronger than I ever knew. So if you're ever driving on a dark, rainy night and see someone who needs help, be careful, trust your instincts, and maybe keep driving to the nearest well-lit public place before stopping. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows. Stay safe out there. I was working late at the office trying to finish up a big project before the weekend. It was already dark outside and a heavy storm had rolled in, with rain pounding against the windows. As I packed up my things to leave, I noticed most of my coworkers had already gone home hours ago. The office was eerily quiet, except for the occasional rumble of thunder. I made my way down to the parking garage, my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, creating strange shadows. I fumbled for my keys, eager to get to my car and head home. That's when I first noticed him, a tall figure standing motionless near one of the support pillars. I tried to convince myself it was just another late worker, but something about his stance made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. As I approached my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced back and saw the man was following me, closing the distance between us quickly. My heart started racing as I picked up my pace, practically running the last few steps to my car. I jammed the key in the lock with shaking hands, desperate to get inside. Just as I yanked the door open, I heard rapid footsteps right behind me. I whirled around and found myself face to face with the stranger. He was wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his eyes, but I could see the glint of metal in his hand, a crowbar. Time seemed to slow down as pure adrenaline and fear coursed through my body. Without thinking, I threw my heavy laptop bag at his face as hard as I could. He staggered back, momentarily stunned. I used that split second to dive into my car, slamming and locking the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The man recovered quickly and started smashing my driver's side window with the crowbar. The glass spiderwebbed but held as I finally got the engine started. I slammed the car into reverse just as the window shattered, raining glass all over me. I floored it out of my parking spot, tires squealing. In my rearview mirror, I saw the man running after my car. I sped towards the exit, praying the gate would open in time. By some miracle, it started to rise just as I approached. I barely slowed down, scraping the top of my car as I sped under the rising barrier. Rain was coming in through the broken window as I sped down the street, heart pounding. I was terrified the man might be following me in another vehicle. I took random turns, trying to lose any potential tail, before finally heading towards the nearest police station. I burst into the station, soaking wet and hysterical. The officers on duty were alarmed by my appearance and obvious distress. Between sobs, I managed to explain what had happened. They immediately sent units to search the area around my office, but found no sign of the attacker. The police took my statement and documented the damage to my car. They assured me they would investigate, check security cameras, and increase patrols in the area. But despite their efforts, they never found the man who attacked me. In the days and weeks that followed, I was constantly on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability, like I was being watched. I started having nightmares about the attack. The sound of breaking glass would make me jump. I couldn't bring myself to work late or park in the garage anymore. My company was sympathetic and allowed me to work from home for a while. They also improved security measures in the parking garage. But even with those changes, I never felt truly safe there again. I eventually ended up finding a new job closer to home, one where I didn't have to use a parking garage. It's been over a year now, and I still think about that night often. I wonder who that man was and why he targeted me. Was it random, or had he been watching me? The not knowing is almost worse than the attack itself. I've done a lot of therapy to work through the trauma, and I'm slowly regaining my sense of security. But I don't think I'll ever take my safety for granted again. I'm much more aware of my surroundings now, especially at night. I carry pepper spray and took self-defense classes. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't reacted so quickly that night. The thought still sends chills down my spine. I'm grateful I escaped relatively unharmed, but the emotional scars run deep. That one terrifying encounter changed how I view the world. I share my story as a warning to others, especially women, to always be vigilant. Trust your instincts if something feels off. Have an escape plan. Don't hesitate to ask for help or call the police if you feel unsafe. Looking back, there were small signs that night that something wasn't right. The unusually empty office, the flickering lights, the lone figure standing unnaturally still. In the moment, I dismissed those red flags. Now I know to pay attention to those gut feelings. The experience has made me a stronger person in many ways. I'm more assertive, more prepared, and I value my personal safety above politeness or not wanting to seem paranoid. But I wish I didn't have to learn those lessons through such a traumatic event. I still have moments where the fear and anxiety come rushing back. A car backfiring or someone walking too close behind me can trigger that fight-or-flight response. But overall, I refuse to let that night define me or limit how I live my life. I'm a survivor, not a victim. To anyone else who has gone through something similar, know that you're not alone. It's okay to not be okay for a while. Healing takes time. Be patient and gentle with yourself. Seek help if you need it. There's no shame in talking to a therapist or joining a support group. I'm sharing my story in hopes that it might help someone else stay safe or feel less alone in their own healing journey. We can't control everything that happens to us, but we can control how we respond and move forward. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and don't let fear win. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, her little head lolling to the side. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, grateful she was oblivious to how treacherous the driving conditions were. I debated pulling over to wait out the storm, but we were in the middle of nowhere and I just wanted to get home. Suddenly, the car hit a slick patch of mud and started to fishtail wildly. My heart leapt into my throat as I struggled to regain control. We careened off the road and down a slight embankment before coming to an abrupt stop, the front tires sunk deep in mud. The jolt woke Lily, who started crying in confusion and fear. "It's okay, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We just slid off the road a little. We're fine." But as I tried to reverse out of the mud, the tires just spun uselessly. We were stuck. I pulled out my phone, but of course there was no signal out here. Panic started to set in as I realized how vulnerable we were, stranded on a deserted road in the middle of a storm, with no way to call for help. I got out to survey the damage, rain immediately drenching me. There was no way I'd be able to push the car out on my own. After about 15 minutes of futile attempts to free the car, headlights appeared in the distance. Relief washed over me. Surely whoever it was would be able to help. As the vehicle approached, I saw it was an old pickup truck. It pulled over and a man got out, holding a large umbrella. "You folks all right?" he called out as he approached. "Looks like you're stuck pretty good." "Yes, we slid off the road," I explained. "Is there any way you could help tow us out?" He peered at the car, rubbing his chin. "I've got a tow chain in my truck. Should be able to pull you out no problem." I was so grateful I could have hugged him. "Thank you so much," I gushed. "We've been stuck here for a while and I was starting to worry." As he went to get the chain, I checked on Lily. She had fallen back asleep, which was probably for the best. I didn't want her to be scared. The man returned and hooked up the chain. "All right, I'm going to need you to steer while I pull," he instructed. I nodded and got back in the driver's seat. It took a few attempts, but finally the car lurched free of the mud. "Oh, thank goodness," I sighed in relief as I put it in park on solid ground. I got out to thank the man again. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate your help," I said. "Is there anything I can do to repay you?" He waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. Just glad I could help." He paused, looking at me intently. "Say, it's still coming down pretty hard. Why don't you follow me to my place up the road? You can wait out the storm there." A small alarm bell went off in my head. As grateful as I was, the thought of going to a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere made me uneasy. "Oh, that's very kind of you," I said. "But I think we'll be okay to make it home now." His expression changed slightly. "You sure? It's awful dangerous driving in this weather. I've got a guest room. You and your little girl would be much safer staying with me tonight." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. His tone had taken on an insistent edge that made me deeply uncomfortable. "No, really, we'll be fine," I said more firmly. "Thank you again for your help." I turned to get back in the car, but he grabbed my arm. "I really think you should come with me," he said, his voice low and threatening. "It would be a shame if you had another accident." Terror shot through me as I realized the danger we were in. This man had not stopped to help. He had been looking for vulnerable prey. I yanked my arm away. "Let go of me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're leaving. Now." His face contorted with anger. "Get in the truck," he growled, reaching for me again. I dodged backwards, fumbling for my keys. "Stay away from us." He lunged forward, but just then another set of headlights appeared. The man froze, clearly not expecting anyone else to come along the deserted road. A large SUV pulled up and two men got out. "Everything all right here?" one of them called out. "Please help us," I cried out. "This man is trying to force us to go with him." The two newcomers quickly assessed the situation. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the lady," the taller one said in an authoritative voice. The would-be attacker glowered at them, clearly furious at the interruption. For a tense moment, I thought he might try to fight, but then he backed off, holding his hands up. "Just trying to help," he muttered. "Crazy woman is imagining things." "I think it's time for you to leave," the other man said firmly. With a final, menacing glare in my direction, the attacker got in his truck and sped off into the night. I sagged with relief, my legs shaky. "Are you all right, ma'am?" one of the men asked gently. I nodded, still trembling. "Yes, thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." They introduced themselves as off-duty police officers who had been on their way home from a fishing trip. They checked to make sure Lily and I were unharmed, then offered to follow us home to ensure we arrived safely. As we drove, with their headlights reassuringly visible in my rearview mirror, I couldn't stop shaking. The realization of how close we had come to disaster overwhelmed me. If they hadn't appeared when they did, I couldn't bear to think about it. When we finally pulled into our driveway, I burst into tears of relief and delayed shock. The two men waited patiently as I collected myself, then helped me carry a still sleeping Lily inside. They did a quick security check of the house before leaving, giving me their card in case I needed anything. That night, I lay awake for hours, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's threatening face. I kept getting up to check on Lily, needing to reassure myself that she was safe. In the days that followed, I was jumpy and on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability, the realization of how quickly an ordinary evening had turned into a nightmare. I reported the incident to the police, but they said that without more information about the man or his vehicle, there wasn't much they could do. It's been months now, and I still get anxious driving on rural roads, especially at night. I'm hyper-vigilant about locking doors and being aware of my surroundings. The experience left me with a deep unease about the hidden dangers that can lurk in everyday situations. I'm incredibly grateful for the miraculous timing of those two off-duty officers. Their appearance quite literally saved us from who knows what horrors. But I can't help wondering, what if they hadn't come along? What if next time there is no last-minute rescue? The incident opened my eyes to how quickly things can go wrong, how vulnerable we can be. It's an awareness I'll carry with me always, a constant reminder to trust my instincts and be prepared for the unexpected. Because sometimes the real monsters aren't hiding under the bed or in dark alleys. They're offering help on a lonely road on a stormy night. I was driving my rig down a lonely stretch of highway when the sky opened up and unleashed a torrential downpour. The rain was coming down so hard I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. I knew I needed to get off the road before I hydroplaned into a ditch, so I started looking for somewhere to pull over and wait out the storm. After a few tense minutes of white-knuckling the steering wheel, I finally spotted a small truck stop up ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief as I carefully guided my 18-wheeler into the parking lot. There were only a couple other trucks there, probably other drivers who'd had the same idea to seek shelter from the biblical deluge outside. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the rain hammering on the roof of the cab. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the darkened lot. I figured I might as well try to grab a quick meal while I waited for the weather to clear up. I grabbed my jacket, pulled the hood up over my head, and made a mad dash for the truck stop diner. As soon as I burst through the door, dripping wet, an odd hush fell over the place. There were only a few other people inside, a waitress behind the counter, a couple of other truckers hunched over cups of coffee, and one sketchy-looking dude sitting alone in a corner booth. They all turned to stare at me as I entered, like I was interrupting something. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, but I tried to shake off the weird vibe. I was probably just jumpy from the storm. I slid into a seat at the counter and ordered a coffee and a burger from the surly waitress. As I waited for my food, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes boring into the back of my skull. I glanced over my shoulder and caught the guy in the corner booth staring at me intently. He quickly looked away when our eyes met, but it left me feeling unsettled. My food arrived, and I scarfed it down quickly, wanting to get back to the relative safety of my truck. I was just finishing up when I felt a presence behind me. I turned to find the sketchy dude from the corner looming over me. "Hey, buddy," he said in a low voice. "I got a business proposition for you." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get the hell out of there, but I was cornered. "Sorry, man, not interested," I muttered, trying to edge away. He clamped a meaty hand on my shoulder, holding me in place. "Now hold on, you haven't even heard my offer yet. It's a simple job, just hauling some cargo for me. I'll make it worth your while." I shrugged off his hand. "Look, pal," I said, "I'm not interested. I've already got a load I'm hauling." His face darkened. "I don't think you understand. This isn't a request." He pulled back his jacket to reveal a gun tucked in his waistband. "You're going to do this job for me, or things are going to get real unpleasant. Got it?" My blood ran cold. I glanced around desperately, but the diner had emptied out while I was eating. Even the waitress had disappeared into the back. I was on my own. "All right," I said, my mouth dry. "What do you need me to do?" He grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "That's more like it. Come on, let's step outside and discuss the details." Heart pounding, I followed him out into the rain. We walked over to a battered van parked at the edge of the lot. He yanked open the rear doors, revealing stacks of unmarked cardboard boxes. "Here's the cargo," he said. "I need you to load these into your trailer and deliver them to an address in the next state over. Should only take you a few hours." I knew those boxes had to be filled with drugs or weapons or God knows what else, but with a gun to my back, I didn't have much choice. I nodded grimly and started hauling boxes to my truck. Once we had everything loaded up, the guy climbed into the passenger seat of my cab. "I'll be riding along to make sure there's no funny business," he growled, patting his gun. I climbed in and fired up the engine with shaking hands. As I pulled out of the lot, my mind was racing. I had to find a way out of this nightmare before I ended up in prison, or worse. We drove in tense silence for about an hour. The rain had finally let up, but the roads were still slick. I kept my eyes peeled for any opportunity to escape or signal for help. Finally, I spotted a turnoff up ahead, a narrow dirt road leading off into thick woods. It was now or never. I suddenly jerked the wheel hard, sending us careening onto the muddy track. "What the hell are you doing?" my unwanted passenger yelled, scrambling for his gun. But before he could get it out, I slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop on the muddy surface sent us into a skid. The truck jackknifed, the trailer swinging around wildly. We spun off the road and plowed into the trees with a sickening crunch of metal. The impact slammed me forward into the steering wheel, dazing me. But adrenaline kicked in, and I fumbled for my seatbelt, desperate to get away before the gunman recovered. I tumbled out of the cab just as a shot rang out, the bullet whizzing past my head. I took off running into the woods as fast as my legs would carry me. I could hear angry shouts and more gunshots behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I just ran and ran until my lungs were burning and my legs felt like jelly. Finally, I collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping for breath. I strained my ears, but I couldn't hear any signs of pursuit. I must have lost him in the dense forest. As the adrenaline faded, the reality of my situation sunk in. I was lost in the middle of nowhere, soaked to the bone, with a violent criminal possibly still hunting for me. But at least I was alive. I took stock of what I had on me, my phone, wallet, and truck keys. The phone was my lifeline. With shaking fingers, I dialed 911 and poured out my story to the dispatcher. They assured me help was on the way and told me to stay put. It felt like an eternity, huddled there in the damp leaves, jumping at every snapping twig. But finally, I heard the blessed sound of sirens in the distance. I stumbled out of my hiding spot, waving my arms frantically as police cars and an ambulance came into view. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. The police found my jackknife truck, but there was no sign of the gunman or the mysterious cargo. They told me I was lucky to be alive. As I sat in the back of an ambulance being checked out, an older cop approached me. "You did the right thing, son," he said gruffly. "We've been trying to crack this drug trafficking ring for months. Your statement is going to be a big help in bringing these scumbags down." I nodded wearily, still in shock from the whole ordeal. Part of me wanted to just put it all behind me and get back on the road. But I knew I had a responsibility to see this through. I owed it to myself and to any other truckers who might fall victim to these criminals. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with the police, giving statements and identifying suspects. It was a long, stressful process, but it paid off. They eventually managed to round up most of the trafficking ring, including the guy who had threatened me at gunpoint. I'd like to say that was the end of it, that I was able to put it all behind me and move on. But the truth is, that night changed me. I still drive trucks for a living, but I'm always looking over my shoulder now, always a little on edge. Every time I pull into a truck stop, I find myself scanning for threats, wondering if danger is lurking just around the corner. I know the odds of something like that happening again are slim, but once you've stared down the barrel of a gun and come face to face with true evil, it's hard to ever feel truly safe again. All I can do is stay vigilant, trust my instincts, and be grateful for every uneventful mile of highway. So, if you're a trucker, or really anyone who travels alone, remember my story. Stay alert, trust your gut, and never be afraid to call for help if something doesn't feel right. You never know when a routine stop might turn into a life-or-death situation. Stay safe out there, folks. It was 3 days into my solo hike on the Appalachian Trail when the storm hit. The forecast had called for some rain, but nothing like this. The wind howled through the trees, bending them at alarming angles. Lightning flashed constantly, followed by deafening cracks of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. I was soaked to the bone within minutes, my gear doing little to keep out the deluge. As darkness fell, the situation went from bad to worse. I could barely see the trail markers through the sheets of rain, and I knew I was in real danger of getting lost. My original plan had been to make it to the next shelter, but in these conditions I had no idea how far away it was, or if I was even still on the right path. Just when I was starting to panic, I spotted a faint glow through the trees. A campfire! I veered off the trail towards it, desperation overriding my usual caution. As I got closer, I could make out the shapes of tents and a tarp strung up for shelter. 4 men were huddled underneath, illuminated by the flickering firelight. "Hello!" I called out as I approached, waving my arms. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I got caught in the storm. Would you mind if I joined you until it passes?" The men turned to look at me, and I felt an immediate sense of unease. There was something off about their expressions. Not the welcoming looks I was used to from fellow hikers, but cold, assessing stares. Still, I was in no position to be picky about company. "Come on over," one of them finally said, gesturing to the tarp. "Can't leave you out in this mess." I gratefully ducked under the shelter, introducing myself and thanking them profusely. They nodded curtly, but didn't offer their own names. Up close, I could see they were a rough-looking bunch, weathered faces, unkempt beards, ragged clothes that didn't look like typical hiking gear. But I reminded myself not to judge based on appearances. As I warmed myself by the fire, the men resumed their quiet conversation. I caught snatches of it over the howling wind, something about goods and buyers and border crossings. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. Were these guys smugglers of some kind? I tried to keep my face neutral as my mind raced. The smart thing would be to make an excuse and leave as soon as the rain let up a bit, but a nagging voice in my head warned me that might look suspicious. So I stayed put, making myself as small and unobtrusive as possible. As the night wore on, my unease only grew. The men kept shooting furtive glances my way when they thought I wasn't looking. At one point, 2 of them stepped away to have a whispered conversation, gesturing in my direction. My heart pounded as I strained to hear what they were saying, but the storm drowned out their words. I must have dozed off at some point despite my anxiety, because I jerked awake suddenly to find one of the men crouched right next to me, his face inches from mine. I yelped and scrambled backwards. "Whoa there," he said with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't mean to startle you. Just checking to make sure you were all right. You were shivering in your sleep." "Oh, thanks," I mumbled, my pulse racing. "I'm fine, though." He nodded and moved away, but I could feel his gaze lingering on me. Sleep was out of the question now. I had to get out of there. The storm had died down to a steady drizzle. I made a show of checking my watch and stretching. "Well, I should probably get going," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "Need to make up some miles. Thanks again for letting me wait out the worst of it here." The men exchanged looks. "You sure?" one of them asked. "It's still pretty nasty out there. Why don't you stay the night? We've got extra space in one of the tents." Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, but I was afraid of arousing suspicion. "That's really kind of you," I said. "Let me just grab my stuff from over here and I'll take you up on that." I edged towards where I'd left my pack, planning to grab it and make a run for it, but as I reached for it, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. "Not so fast," a gruff voice said. "I think we need to have a little chat first." Panic exploded in my chest. I wrenched away from his grip and bolted into the darkness, not caring what direction I was going as long as it was away from them. I could hear shouts and crashing footsteps behind me as they gave chase. I ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping at my face and roots threatening to trip me with every step. The sound of pursuit spurred me on even as my lungs burned for air. I had no idea where I was or where I was going, but I knew I couldn't let them catch me. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I spotted a clearing up ahead. As I burst out of the tree line, I saw a small building with a light on inside. A ranger station. I sprinted towards it, pounding on the door with both fists. "Help! Please, let me in!" I screamed. The door flew open and I practically fell inside, coming face to face with a startled-looking park ranger. "What in the world?" he exclaimed, taking in my wild-eyed, bedraggled state. Between gasping breaths, I poured out my story, getting lost in the storm, stumbling upon the camp, the men's suspicious behavior, and my terrifying flight through the woods. The ranger listened with growing concern, then immediately radioed for backup. As we waited for more rangers to arrive, he gave me a blanket and some water, gently asking for more details about what I'd seen and heard at the camp. I told him everything I could remember, my hands shaking as the adrenaline began to wear off. When the other rangers got there, they took my statement again and then headed out to investigate the campsite, leaving one behind to stay with me. But when they returned a couple hours later, they looked puzzled and frustrated. "We found the site," one of them reported. "There was definitely evidence of recent camping activity. But whoever was there is long gone now. No sign of them anywhere in the area." I felt simultaneously relieved and unsettled. Had I imagined the whole thing? No, I was sure it had happened. But who were those men, and where had they disappeared to so quickly? The rangers were sympathetic, but clearly skeptical of my wild tale. In the light of day, with no evidence to back up my claims, I'm sure it sounded far-fetched. They probably assumed I was just another hiker who'd gotten spooked by shadows in the woods. They gave me a ride to the nearest town, where I got a hotel room and tried to collect myself. I kept replaying the night's events in my mind, second-guessing every detail. Had I overreacted, misinterpreted some innocent camper's behavior? But deep down, I knew what I'd seen and felt. Those men had meant me harm. I was sure of it. The thought of what might have happened if I hadn't managed to escape still makes me shudder. I cut my hike short after that, too rattled to continue alone on the trail. To this day, I have no explanation for what really happened that night. Were they drug smugglers, human traffickers, just some creeps who got their kicks terrorizing lone hikers? I'll probably never know. All I know is that I'll never forget those cold eyes in the firelight, or the blind panic of running for my life through the pitch-black forest. It was a harsh reminder that even in the beauty of nature, danger can lurk where you least expect it. I still love hiking, but I'm a lot more careful now about who I trust in the wilderness. Just when I thought I might have to pull over and wait out the storm, I spotted a faint glow in the distance. As I got closer, I could make out the flickering neon sign of a small gas station. Relief washed over me as I pulled into the empty lot. The place looked pretty run down, with peeling paint and rust stains on the pumps. But beggars can't be choosers, and I was just grateful to find somewhere to fill up and maybe grab a quick coffee before getting back on the road. I pulled up to one of the pumps and got out, shivering as the cold rain hit me. The station looked deserted, but there was a dim light coming from inside the small convenience store attached to it. I hurried over and pushed open the door, a little bell jingling as I entered. The interior was dingy and cramped, with dusty shelves holding a meager selection of snacks and drinks. Behind the counter stood an old man, hunched over with wispy white hair. He looked up as I came in, fixing me with rheumy eyes. "Evening," I said with a nod. "Just need to fill up my tank and grab some coffee if you've got any." The old man didn't respond, just kept staring at me with an unsettling intensity. I shifted uncomfortably, suddenly hyper-aware of how isolated this place was. Is it all right if I use the pump?" I asked, gesturing towards my car outside. After another long pause, the man finally spoke in a raspy voice. "Go ahead. I'll turn it on from in here." "Thanks," I said, eager to get out of there. I headed back out into the rain and started filling up my tank. As I stood there, I kept glancing back at the store window. I could see the old man still watching me, unmoving. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Once my tank was full, I reluctantly went back inside to pay. The old man's eyes followed my every move as I approached the counter. "That'll be $47.82, he said. I pulled out my wallet and handed over some cash. As the man slowly counted out my change, I cleared my throat. "Any chance I could get some coffee for the road?" I asked. The old man's face twisted into what might have been a smile, though it looked more like a grimace. "Sure thing. Help yourself. Pot's in the back." He gestured towards a door behind the counter. I hesitated, not wanting to go further into this creepy place, but the thought of hot coffee was too tempting to pass up. "Thanks," I said, edging around the counter. The back room was small and cluttered, with a rickety table holding an ancient-looking coffee maker. I grabbed a styrofoam cup and poured myself some of the dark liquid, grimacing at the burnt smell. As I turned to leave, I heard a loud click. My blood ran cold as I realized the old man had locked the door, trapping me in the back room. "Hey!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "What's going on? Let me out!" I heard shuffling footsteps. Then the old man's voice came through the door. "Can't let you leave, I'm afraid. Been too long since I had company. You'll stay here with me now." Panic flooded through me as the reality of the situation sank in. I was trapped in this tiny room by a deranged old man in the middle of nowhere. My mind raced, trying to figure a way out. I scanned the room frantically, looking for anything I could use as a weapon or tool. My eyes fell on the coffee maker. It was heavy, made of metal and glass. It would have to do. I unplugged it and lifted it off the table, surprised by its weight. Then I took a deep breath and shouted, "I'm warning you. Open this door right now or I'm breaking it down." There was no response from the other side. I took a few steps back, then charged forward, swinging the coffee maker like a battering ram. It connected with a satisfying crunch, splintering the cheap wooden door. I swung again and again, fueled by desperation. On the fourth hit, the door gave way entirely. I burst through into the store, wild-eyed and wielding the battered coffee maker. The old man was right there, eyes wide with shock. Before he could react, I swung the coffee maker and caught him in the side of the head. He went down hard, crumpling to the floor with a groan. I didn't wait to see if he'd get back up. I sprinted for the exit, fumbling with the lock before bursting out into the rainy night. I ran to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of there, tires squealing on the wet pavement. In my rearview mirror, I saw the old man stumble out of the store, but I was already speeding away into the darkness. My heart was pounding as I drove, constantly checking behind me to make sure I wasn't being followed. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, I finally saw the lights of other cars. I'd reached the highway. I pulled into the first rest stop I came across, hands trembling as I cut the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, trying to process what had just happened. Then I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Came a calm voice. I need to report an attempted kidnapping, I stammered. At a gas station off Route 16, about 30 miles back, an old man tried to lock me in and keep me there. The dispatcher took down all the details, assuring me they'd send officers to investigate right away. They asked if I needed medical attention, but aside from some bruises and scrapes from breaking down the door, I was physically fine. After I hung up, I just sat in my car for a long time, jumping at every sound. Eventually, an officer showed up to take my official statement. I told him everything, still hardly able to believe it myself. "We'll look into this right away," the officer assured me. "You did the right thing getting out of there and calling us? Is there someone who can come pick you up? I don't think you should be driving in this state." I nodded numbly and called a friend who lived in the area. As I waited for them to arrive, I kept replaying the night's events in my mind. The whole thing felt surreal, like a nightmare I'd wake up from at any moment. But it wasn't a dream. It had really happened. I'd narrowly escaped being imprisoned by a madman in a backwoods gas station. The thought made me shudder. My friend arrived and insisted I stay at their place for the night. I was grateful for the company. I don't think I could have been alone just then. The next day I got a call from the police. They'd investigated the gas station and found evidence that the old man had been holding other people captive there. Hidden rooms, restraints, the whole horrifying setup. But the man himself was gone, having fled sometime in the night. They assured me they were doing everything to track him down. I gave them as much information as I could remember about his appearance and mannerisms. But part of me doubted they'd ever find him. It's been months now, and I still have nightmares about that night. I can't bring myself to stop at isolated gas stations anymore, always waiting for ones in well-lit, populated areas. The fear lingers, along with so many unanswered questions. How long had that old man been trapping people there? How many others weren't as lucky as me? And most chillingly, where is he now? Is he still out there waiting for his next victim to stop for gas on a dark and stormy night? I may never know the answers, but I do know one thing. I'll never take my safety for granted again. Because sometimes the real monsters aren't hiding under the bed or in the closet. Sometimes they're standing right in front of us, waiting for their chance to strike. As I navigated the maze of warehouses and factories, rain started pelting my windshield. The streets were deserted, lit only by the occasional flickering streetlight. I double-checked the address. It was for one of the abandoned-looking buildings at the very back of the industrial park. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. Probably just some night shift workers ordering a late dinner, I told myself. I pulled up to the dilapidated warehouse and grabbed the food bag. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the rusted metal siding and broken windows. Thunder rumbled ominously as I approached the side door. My footsteps echoed in the empty lot. I knocked hesitantly, no answer. I was about to leave when I heard muffled voices and shuffling inside. The door creaked open a crack, and a pair of bloodshot eyes peered out at me. Delivery for Mike?" I said, forcing a smile. The man grunted and opened the door wider. That's when I saw it. Stacks of cash and bricks of white powder on a table behind him. My blood ran cold as I realized I had stumbled upon some kind of drug deal. Several other rough-looking men turned to stare at me. One reached for something at his waistband. I froze in terror, my mind racing. "Wrong address," I blurted out, backing away. "Sorry to bother you." I spun around and sprinted for my car, my heart pounding. I heard angry shouts behind me as I fumbled for my keys. Just as I reached for the door handle, a gunshot rang out. The passenger window exploded in a shower of glass. I dove into the driver's seat as more shots peppered my car. Hands shaking, I jammed the key in the ignition and peeled out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw 3 men piling into a black SUV. Oh God, I muttered, swerving onto the main road. Rain lashed against the windshield as I floored it, tires squealing on the wet pavement. The SUV's headlights appeared behind me, gaining fast. I weaved through the industrial park, taking random turns in an attempt to lose them. But they stayed on my tail, the growl of their engine getting closer. Another gunshot cracked the air. My side mirror shattered, panic rising in my throat. I realized I didn't know my way out of this maze-like area. The tall warehouses all looked the same in the darkness. I was trapped. Just then, I spotted a narrow alley between 2 buildings. Without thinking, I yanked the wheel and shot down the alleyway. Metal scraped against brick as I squeezed through. The SUV was too wide to follow. I heard curses and the screech of brakes behind me. A small victory, but I knew they'd find another way around soon. I burst out of the alley onto another street, my tires skidding in the rain. Where to go? My frantic eyes landed on a port access sign. The docks. Maybe I could lose them in the maze of shipping containers. I sped toward the port, my hands clenched on the wheel. The rain was coming down in sheets now, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I squinted through the windshield, barely able to see the road. Suddenly, headlights appeared ahead. The SUV had cut me off. I slammed on the brakes, but the wet road sent me into a spin. Everything blurred as I spun out of control. With a sickening crunch, my car slammed into a lamppost. The airbag exploded in my face. Dazed and aching, I looked up to see the SUV screeching to a halt nearby. Terror gave me a surge of adrenaline. I scrambled out of the crumpled car and ran blindly into the night. I could hear car doors slamming and shouting behind me. I sprinted down the rows of towering shipping containers, my shoes splashing through puddles. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating my surroundings. I ducked down a narrow gap between containers, pressing myself against the cold metal. Heavy footsteps and angry voices echoed nearby. I held my breath, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. "He went this way. Find him." I stayed frozen in place, not daring to move a muscle. Rain dripped down my face as I listened to them searching. After what felt like hours, the voices faded into the distance. Trembling, I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. With shaking fingers, I dialed 911. Please help," I whispered when the operator answered. "I'm at the port. Some men are trying to kill me. I saw drugs. So much money. Please hurry." I gave them what details I could. The operator assured me help was on the way, but told me to stay hidden. So I huddled there in the shadows, jumping at every sound. The storm raged on, wind howling between the metal containers. I was soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably. After what felt like an eternity, I heard sirens in the distance. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. Footsteps splashed nearby. A beam of light swept across the containers. They had found me. I pressed myself further into the shadows, hardly daring to breathe. The flashlight beam crept closer. I could hear the man's ragged breathing. Just as the light was about to reveal my hiding spot, shouts rang out. "Police! Freeze!" Chaos erupted. I heard running footsteps, more shouting, the pop of gunfire. I stayed put, too terrified to move. Finally, a police officer found me. "It's okay, you're safe now," he said gently, helping me to my feet. My legs could barely hold me as he led me out to the waiting ambulance. I was in shock, barely registering the flashing lights and bustling activity around me. As the paramedics checked me over, I saw several men in handcuffs being loaded into police cars. One of them caught my eye and gave me a bone-chilling glare. I quickly looked away, shuddering. The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements and hospital exams. When I was finally cleared to go home, the sun was starting to rise. I took a taxi home, too shaken to even think about driving. As we passed the industrial area, I sank low in my seat, half expecting to see that black SUV appear again. It's been weeks, but I still have nightmares about that night. The sound of gunshots, the glare of headlights in my rearview mirror, the feeling of utter helplessness as I ran for my life. I quit my delivery job immediately. I can barely leave my apartment now without having a panic attack. Every car that lingers too long behind me sends me into a cold sweat. I keep replaying that moment when I knocked on the warehouse door, wishing I had trusted my instincts and left. The police told me the men were part of a major drug trafficking ring. They thanked me for helping bring them down. But that's little comfort when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m., convinced I hear footsteps outside my door. I know I should feel lucky to have survived, and part of me is glad those criminals are off the streets. But mostly, I just feel broken. That one delivery changed everything. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. So if you're thinking about taking that late-night delivery job for some extra cash, take it from me. It's not worth the risk. You never know what darkness is lurking behind that door. Around 9 p.m., the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Great, a power outage. I fumbled around in the dark for my phone to use as a flashlight. As my eyes adjusted, I could just make out the shadowy outlines of furniture by the dim moonlight filtering through the windows. I decided to light some candles to create a bit of ambiance. Moving carefully through the darkness, I made my way to the kitchen to grab matches from a drawer. That's when I heard it, a soft thud from upstairs, barely audible over the pounding rain. My heart leapt into my throat. It was probably nothing, right? Just the wind or a tree branch hitting the roof. But a prickle of unease ran down my spine. I stood frozen, straining my ears. For several long moments, there was only the sound of rain and my own shallow breathing. Then I heard it again, unmistakable this time, the creak of floorboards overhead, as if someone was moving around up there. Panic flooded through me. Oh God, someone was in the house. My mind raced. What should I do? Call the police? Try to escape? The logical part of my brain said to get out immediately, but fear kept me rooted to the spot. I don't know how long I stood there paralyzed with indecision. Seconds, minutes, time seemed to stretch and warp. Then a sound snapped me back to reality. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. They were coming down. Pure survival instinct took over. I had to hide, had to arm myself somehow. My eyes darted around the kitchen, searching desperately for anything I could use as a weapon. They landed on a heavy cast iron skillet hanging by the stove. I grabbed it, the cold metal reassuring in my trembling hands. Heart pounding, I pressed myself into the narrow space between the refrigerator and the wall. It was a terrible hiding spot, but the best I could manage in my panicked state. I tried to control my ragged breathing, terrified the intruder would hear me. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. They paused for a moment, then began moving through the house. Slow, methodical, as if they were searching for something or someone. "Please don't come in here," I silently begged. "Please just take what you want and leave." But the footsteps drew closer. I could hear them in the dining room now, just on the other side of the kitchen doorway. Tears of terror pricked my eyes. This couldn't be happening. Any second now, they would enter the kitchen and find me. The intruder paused in the doorway. Though I couldn't see them, I sensed their presence. They must have noticed the disturbed drawer where I'd grabbed the matches. They knew someone was in here. "I know you're here," a man's voice called out softly. "Why don't you come out so we can talk?" His tone was deceptively gentle, almost soothing, but it sent chills down my spine. I remained silent, hardly daring to breathe. "No," he said after a moment. "That's all right. I'll find you soon enough." He began moving again, circling the kitchen. My muscles were cramping from holding so still, but I didn't dare shift position. He was going to find me any second. Oh God, what was he going to do to me? I heard him stop right in front of the fridge. This was it. I gripped the skillet so tightly my knuckles turned white, prepared to fight for my life. Suddenly he wrenched the fridge away from the wall. I screamed as I was exposed, swinging the skillet wildly. By sheer luck, it connected with his head with a sickening thud. He staggered back, stunned. I didn't hesitate. I bolted past him and ran for the front door. But in my panic, I'd forgotten it was locked. My shaking hands fumbled with the deadbolt as I heard him recovering behind me. Just as I got the door open, a hand grabbed my hair, yanking me backwards. I shrieked in pain and terror. No, no, no. This couldn't be happening. We grappled in the darkness. He was much stronger, but I fought like a wild animal, scratching, kicking, biting, anything to break free. My hand closed around something solid on a nearby table, a heavy crystal vase. I smashed it into the side of his head with all my strength. He released me with a roar of pain. I sprinted out the open door into the rainy night. The wet grass was slippery under my bare feet as I ran across the lawn. Where should I go? My nearest neighbors were the Johnsons, about 50 yards down the road. I chanced to glance behind me. A dark figure was lurching out of my house in pursuit. Oh God, he was coming after me. I pushed myself to run faster, my lungs burning. Almost there, just a little further. I could see the porch light of the Johnsons' house, a beacon of safety in the stormy darkness. I bounded up their front steps and began pounding frantically on the door. "Help! Please help me!" I screamed. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, the door opened. Mr. Johnson stood there looking confused and concerned. "Please," I gasped. "There's someone. He broke in. He's after me." I glanced back toward the road, expecting to see my attacker bearing down on us. But there was no one there, just empty darkness and sheeting rain. Mr. Johnson ushered me inside as his wife called the police. They arrived quickly, lights flashing and sirens blaring. But a thorough search of the area turned up nothing. The intruder had vanished into the night. The police took my statement and documented my injuries. Bruises, scratches, and a chunk of hair ripped out. They found signs of forced entry at my house and blood where I'd struck the intruder with the vase. But despite an extensive investigation, they never caught him. It's been months now, but I still have nightmares about that night. I've moved to a new place with a high-tech security system, but I don't know if I'll ever truly feel safe again. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, every little sound makes me jump. I find myself wondering, is he still out there? Will he come back for me someday? I know I'm lucky to have survived, but part of me wishes I knew why he chose my house, why he hunted me through the darkness. Not knowing is almost worse than what actually happened. All I can do is try to move forward and heal. But I'll never forget the terror of that stormy night when a stranger invaded my home and nearly took my life. I was working late at the office again, trying to finish up a big project before the weekend. It was already dark outside when I finally shut down my computer and gathered my things to leave. As I walked towards the elevator, I noticed how eerily quiet the building was. I seemed to be the only one left on my floor. The weather had taken a turn for the worse while I was working. As the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I could hear rain pelting against the windows and occasional rumbles of thunder in the distance. Great, just what I needed after a long day. I rummaged through my purse, hoping I had remembered to bring an umbrella, but no such luck. I steeled myself for a dash through the rain to my car. The company parking lot was huge, and my spot was near the back. As I pushed open the heavy glass doors, the wind nearly knocked me off my feet. Rain was coming down in sheets, instantly soaking through my thin blouse. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the rows of cars. I hurried across the parking lot, my heels splashing through quickly forming puddles. The storm was really picking up now, with deafening cracks of thunder following each lightning strike. I fumbled for my keys, wanting to get to my car as quickly as possible. About halfway to my car, the hairs on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. I glanced around nervously, but didn't see anyone else in the lot. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy sensation. I picked up my pace, no longer caring about the rain. As I neared my car, movement in my peripheral vision made me freeze. There was definitely someone else out here. Through the rain, I could just make out a dark figure a few rows over, walking parallel to me. My heart started racing. Maybe it was just another employee leaving late, but something about the way they were moving set off alarm bells. I reached my car and fumbled with shaking hands to unlock the door. Just as I was about to open it, a flash of lightning illuminated the parking lot. The figure was much closer now, and I could see it was a man in a dark hoodie. He had changed course and was now coming directly towards me with purposeful strides. Panic exploded in my chest. I yanked open the car door and dove inside, slamming it shut behind me. My trembling fingers struggled to get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the man reached my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw him pull something long and metallic from his hoodie. It looked like a crowbar. Before I could process what was happening, there was a deafening crash as he swung the crowbar into my rear windshield. The glass spider-webbed but didn't shatter completely. I screamed and slammed the car into reverse, not even checking if anyone was behind me. The tires squealed as I floored it out of the space. The man lunged at my driver's side window, swinging the crowbar again. I ducked instinctively as glass shards exploded inward. Rain and wind whipped through the broken window as I frantically shifted into drive and peeled out of the parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I ran through a red light, not daring to slow down. In my rearview mirror, I could see headlights following close behind. Oh God, was it him? Had he gotten to his own car that quickly? I took random turns through residential streets, trying to lose my pursuer. The headlights stayed glued to my rear bumper. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to figure out what to do. I didn't want to lead this maniac to my house. Then I remembered there was a police station nearby. I made a sharp turn onto the main road, tires screeching. The police station was only a few blocks away now. The headlights were still behind me but seemed to be falling back slightly. I blew through another red light, not caring about anything except reaching safety. Finally, the lit-up sign for the police station came into view. I pulled into the parking lot going way too fast, the car fishtailing slightly on the wet pavement. I screeched to a halt right in front of the entrance and leapt out, leaving the engine running. I burst through the station doors, hysterical and soaking wet. "Help! Please! Someone's after me!" I screamed. The startled officer at the front desk jumped up. "Ma'am, calm down. What happened?" Between gasping sobs, I managed to explain about the attack in the parking lot and being followed. 2 officers rushed outside to check the parking lot, while another gently guided me to sit down. After taking my statement and checking the security cameras around the station, they confirmed no one had followed me there. They sent a unit to check out the parking lot at my office, but found no sign of the attacker. My car was dusted for fingerprints, but they didn't find anything useful. In the end, despite an investigation, they never caught the man who attacked me. They speculated it may have been an attempted carjacking, but I'm not so sure. The determined way he came after me, the fact that he had a crowbar ready. It felt personal somehow, like he had been waiting for me specifically. It's been months now, but I still have nightmares about that night. I'm jumpier than I used to be, always looking over my shoulder. I bought a new car because I couldn't stand to keep driving the one with the smashed windows. I switched to a daytime shift at work and always make sure to leave with other people now. But late at night, when I'm lying awake, listening to every little sound, I can't shake the fear that he's still out there, waiting, watching. I don't know if I'll ever feel truly safe again. That night, a nasty storm was rolling in. The wind was howling something fierce, rattling the loose metal siding of the building. Rain was coming down in sheets, drumming on the roof like machine gun fire. I'd just finished my 2 a.m. round and was heading back to the tiny security office to warm up. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a car engine, barely audible over the storm. My first thought was that it was probably just some teenagers looking for a place to park, but something in my gut told me this was different. I killed the lights in the office and peered out the grimy window. A beat-up van pulled up to the loading dock, headlights off. 4 men got out, all dressed in dark clothes. They were moving with purpose, not like kids sneaking around for fun. My heart started racing. This was it, the situation I'd been trained for, but never actually expected to face. I reached for the phone to call the police, but my blood ran cold when I realized the line was dead. The storm must have knocked out the landline. I grabbed for my cell phone next, but of course there was no signal out here in the middle of nowhere. I was on my own. I watched as the men pried open one of the loading dock doors. They were inside now. I had to think fast. There was no way I could take on 4 guys by myself. My only option was to try to hide, maybe find a way to sneak out and get help. I slipped out of the office as quietly as I could, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. The warehouse was pitch black, but I knew the layout like the back of my hand. I made my way to the back of the building, ducking behind shelves and old equipment. I could hear them talking now, their voices echoing in the cavernous space. They were looking for something specific, arguing about where it might be hidden. I didn't know what they were after, and I didn't want to stick around to find out. Just as I thought I was in the clear, my foot caught on a piece of debris. I stumbled, knocking over a stack of empty plastic crates. The crash seemed deafening in the quiet building. I froze, praying they somehow hadn't heard. "What was that?" One of the men shouted, "Check it out!" Footsteps were coming my way fast. I scrambled to my feet and ran, no longer worried about stealth. I could hear them shouting behind me, giving chase. I darted down an aisle, zigging and zagging between the shelves. My lungs were burning, but pure adrenaline kept me going. I rounded a corner and spotted a stack of old pallets. Without thinking, I dove behind them, squeezing myself into the tiny space. I held my breath, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. The footsteps got closer. A beam from a flashlight swept over my hiding spot. I could see the man's boots just inches from my face. He paused for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then, mercifully, he moved on. I stayed there, barely daring to breathe, as I listened to them search the area. After what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, I heard one of them call out, "Forget it, man. There's no one here. We must have scared off a rat or something. Let's get back to work." I waited until I was sure they were gone before I allowed myself to move. My whole body was shaking. I knew I needed to get out of there, but I was terrified of running into them again. Slowly, carefully, I made my way towards the office. I figured if I could get there, I might be able to signal for help somehow. The storm was still raging outside, the wind and rain masking any small sounds I might make. I was almost there when I heard voices again, this time much closer. They were heading towards the office, too. I ducked behind a forklift, praying the shadows would hide me. Two of the men walked right past me, so close I could have reached out and touched them. They were carrying something. Looked like some kind of electronic equipment. I held my breath until they passed, then waited a few more seconds to be sure. This was my chance. I crept towards the office, my eyes darting everywhere for any sign of the intruders. I made it inside and quietly closed the door behind me. Now what? I scanned the tiny room desperately. There had to be something I could use. My eyes fell on the ancient CB radio in the corner. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I turned it on, praying the static wouldn't alert the men outside. I flipped through the channels, hoping to hear something, anything, just static. Then, miraculously, I heard a voice. "This is Sheriff Thompson. Anybody out there?" I grabbed the mic, my hands shaking. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is the night watchman at the old Millbrook warehouse. There are intruders here. I need help." There was a moment of silence that felt like forever. Then, "Copy that. Stay where you are. Help is on the way. Can you tell me how many intruders?" I relayed what I knew, my voice barely above a whisper. The sheriff assured me they were coming, but it would take at least 20 minutes to get there. I just had to hold on. No sooner had I put down the mic than I heard footsteps approaching the office. I dove under the desk, praying they wouldn't come in. The door creaked open. I held my breath, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. A beam of light swept the room. "Nothing here," a gruff voice said. "Let's finish up and get out of here." The door closed. I stayed frozen in place, afraid to move a muscle. Minutes ticked by like hours. I strained my ears for any sound of the intruders, but all I could hear was the storm and my own ragged breathing. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside, shouting, the sound of breaking glass. Then, clear as day, "Police, don't move." I nearly cried with relief. I crawled out from under the desk on shaky legs and opened the office door. The warehouse was flooded with light from police flashlights. I saw the 4 men on their knees, hands behind their heads, surrounded by officers. Sheriff Thompson approached me, concern etched on his weathered face. "You all right, son? That was some quick thinking with that CB radio." I nodded, still too shaken to speak. As the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd faced down dangerous criminals, outsmarted them, and lived to tell the tale. The sheriff filled me in as the scene was processed. Turned out the men were part of a ring of thieves who'd been hitting warehouses all over the county. They thought this place was abandoned and were using it to stash stolen goods. If I hadn't been there, who knows how long they would have kept operating. As I watched the police lead the men away in handcuffs, I felt a strange mix of pride and lingering fear. I'd always wondered how I'd react in a real crisis, and now I knew. I'd kept my cool, used my wits, and made it out alive. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon as things wound down. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, clean morning. As I gave my official statement to a detective, I couldn't help but think about how different things could have gone. I'd like to say I quit that job on the spot and never looked back. But the truth is, I stuck with it for another year. The company beefed up security after that night. Better locks, a real alarm system, even a partner for the night shift. But I never forgot that feeling of being alone in the dark, outnumbered and outgunned. To this day, I still get a little jumpy during thunderstorms. The sound of rain on a metal roof brings it all flooding back. The fear, the adrenaline, the sheer will to survive. It was the longest night of my life, but it taught me something important. We're all capable of more than we think when our backs are against the wall. Sometimes all it takes is a little courage and a lot of luck to make it through to the other side.